We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases, where we dig into a critically acclaimed movie and evaluate the truth claims within it. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week we're joined by... I've been here before. I know how to do this job. Nate Ward and Sheldon Stauffer of the Things We Say podcast, of which I've been a guest several times, but couldn't remember the name.
Yes.
It is such a pleasure to have you guys here. Tell us a bit about yourselves.
You go first.
Me?
I
was on 2 episodes ago.
Sheldon's our first repeat guest.
First repeat guest.
Sheldon, welcome.
Yeah. And this is weird because I only saw Star Wars as an adult. I never grew up as a kid.
Which
with
was one
Star
of my
Wars.
favorite things.
So I've done all my Star Wars watching in the last 4 years.
Which I forget, did we watch them together?
No.
Not at all.
Me and you have not watched them together.
Yeah.
For my memory,
Nate's been a lifelong Star Wars
because of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're doing good, Nate.
Yeah. So anyway,
because of
friend
Rylan and Nate.
Yeah.
So yeah, you obviously have previous introductions. So yeah, I'm Nate. Let's see, I'm 39, going to be 40 this year.
Woo.
I'm looking forward to it.
You don't look a day past 50.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The only thing that weirds me out about turning 40 is that I remember my dad turning 40, and that's just a strange thing. When you it's the first birthday of my dad's that I remember.
Yeah.
And so that's a strange thing. But other than that, I'm feeling it. It's going to be good. Sheldon will get to call me an old man for a month before he turns 40 as well.
And
but
you have a bunch of littles, right?
I do. I have 4 kids. Their names are Strong, Eowyn, Normandy, and our newest addition is Vienna, our 4th and final child, unless we adopt later.
Unless you have more.
Right, that's right. That's right. Yes. But
Safe caveat.
Yeah. In the traditional sense, she will be our last child. How about that? Because that is done and done. But yeah, I'm a pastor. I've been on staff at the church I'm at for 17 years, but I've been there since 1995 because I came with my dad. He is our lead pastor. It's good. I love it. I love being in ministry. I love the church. Yeah. So that's me in a small nutshell.
Cool. Before we get to the questions, should we tell them what movie we're watching, or what order do you want to do this in? Should I introduce the movie?
So our actual show notes tell us that we're supposed to do the questions for them first, but we always introduce the movie.
That's what
first.
I thought. I was like, this. It felt like
I'm bad at following my own instructions.
Real quick, and then we'll get into we'll question Nate here.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the final movie of the Star Wars trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars Episode 6: Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
1983, just recently turned 40 years old.
Yep.
It was in theaters recently. Runtime is 2 hours and 11 minutes, and Richard Marquand is the director, rated PG. So we can get into the other stuff.
He
later.
died like a few years after this. This was like one of his last movies.
I did not know that.
Well, now you do.
Yeah, that makes sense why he had nothing else after this. All right. So, Nate, as a guest, and Sheldon, again, if anything has changed for you since your last time on here, feel free to chime in. But we have 3 questions we always give our guests just to get to know a little bit about you. So first one here, what's your political bias? Where do you stand politically, or what do you have any affiliations, or are you apolitical? What how would you describe yourself?
The majority of my political philosophy is I will vote for whoever will leave us the most alone. Yeah. I am very libertarian in my views. Unfortunately, in the current state of things, that means that I vote Republican more than I vote anything else. Mm-hmm. There are some Democrats that I've liked recently, but they've gotten drummed out of their party. I'm not a big believer in the two political system, but I also don't see the two groups as an absolute monolith. There's a lot of variation, or at least there used to be a lot of variation between both parties. Unfortunately, I do feel like the Democrat Party is becoming a little more lockstep, which, again, has kind of drifted me away from.
So when you say
that.
you don't see the two as a monolith, you mean that you don't see each party as a monolith within its party?
Correct.
Okay. What I thought you meant, what you were saying, which is actually my opinion, which is they're basically the same.
Yes, it depends on who you're talking about.
They're one coin.
So, like, if you're looking at a Mitch McConnell, a Hillary Clinton, John Boehner, some of those guys, like, these are all just the same people. This is what you're getting: the same crew, the same people. hang out at cocktail hour and then go on the news and blast each other and then
Yeah.
go hang out at another cocktail hour afterwards. So, but
But to
I'm
be
talking,
fair, we do the same.
right? But I'm talking right. That's right. But I'm talking political philosophy overall, and that's just where, again, I will vote for whoever will leave us the most alone.
Right.
I vote no on every tax levy. Period.
A true patriot.
Yeah, that's pretty much. That's
I'm
pretty
not
much
even
it.
saying
Yeah.
that ironically. Like,
Yeah, no, but it's
that's
genuinely true. The only times I will occasionally make exceptions are for fire and police, because I figure if I do need them in a pinch, I would like them to be well equipped.
Right. And a
that
free market
directly,
could never
that
provide those
directly affects
solutions.
me. No, that's a whole nother thing. I could talk about that for a while. But anyway, so yeah, my political affiliation, I would say, is I was raised in the very, Republican mindset.
Yeah.
But the older I've gotten and the more that I've read and the more that I've seen, I have moved much more into the libertarian
Right on.
realm.
Cool.
Would you say minarchist?
Are you guys about to become best friends?
Or like me, do you think that there's no legitimate use for government and it could all be replaced by markets?
I think for the most part, the things that the United States government does are outside of its purview. I believe, according to their original constitutional limitations, the American government would function very well. But unfortunately, we have drifted far from that, mostly by doing things that are not technically, things like the existence of the IRS that aren't technically a government agency, but are clearly a government agency and are part of the problem of where we're at. So 1913 was a bad year. Let's just put it that way.
To bum out the constitutionalists in the crowd, as Lysander Spooner said in his essay, No Constitution, written during the Civil War, the Constitution either enabled or failed to prevent the largest government we've ever seen. And he said that during the Civil War, and it's only gotten bigger since then.
Right.
All right. Nelson, has anything changed?
In my political
Oh, no,
opinions? No, nothing
Sheldon.
at all.
I'm looking at Sheldon.
I
I
was
said
gonna
Nelson.
say.
I've been very consistent.
No, nothing's changed with. I'm a Ron.
He's actually now a Democratic Socialist.
I'm a Ron
But I will
Republican.
I will give one quick response to that.
Yeah.
Because I had to think about it for a second. But my thing is, I do not think that's an issue with the Constitution. I think that's an issue with the electorate and politicians realizing that they can lock in an uninformed demographic. You saw this with, when slaves were set free and they instantly became a lock vote for the Republican Party, even though they had no idea how the tools of government worked and they were not taught. They were never shown. Same with the vote from women for the majority of the part. We have seen, and you're seeing a lot of that with the Hispanic vote now, one party vying for which one of us can give amnesty and take care of the quote illegal immigration problem. I think it's an uninformed electorate and a manipulative elected body.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. But again, for an informed electorate as it was supposed to be, again, I think the Constitution is a good thing. It's not perfect, but that's why you can amend it.
I think you described that really well.
But yeah, there we go. I can stop now. This isn't about that. As I say on our podcast, that's not why we're here.
That actually, it is about that.
Okay, good.
That's what this is for.
We talk about how the movies affect our modern and reality, like
our own biases.
Yeah. So, second question: what's your religious bias?
I am Christian, and I mean that in the true, I am a Christ follower sense, not just I happen to go to church every once in a while. I am a pastor. My specific affiliation is basically Wesleyan Arminian tradition. I'm from a subset of that called the Nazarene Church, which is a fairly large, one of the largest Wesleyan denominations, actually. I am a third generation in ministry in that denomination. My dad's two brothers and him were in ministry for 40 plus years each. 30 to 40 plus years each. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was also in ministry for 30 some years. And I have some of that pedigree on my mom's side, but it skipped a generation. So I am long-term on the Church of the Nazarene. But one of the beautiful things about that is that it is a very wide umbrella. We don't make a whole lot of hard, fast doctrinal statements other than, Jesus is who he said he is. We believe that he died bodily, was buried, was resurrected bodily. We believe those essentials of the faith. And the other things, we'll have fellowship with pretty much anybody without any issue. We can have what I call the family table discussions, disagreeing on some of the finer points. But there's a really, really wide umbrella that a lot can fit under. So you'll find everything from very liturgical Nazarenes, pastors who will actually wear vestments and priestly collars to, my dad will wear Nike tracksuits to preach in, sometimes, so
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's all over the place. And it's an international church. And so my views, I think my views are very broad, but they are very specifically Nazarene.
Right on. Sheldon,
Nate-
has anything changed in the last week or so?
Nate and I serve at the same church.
Yes.
So.
Yep. Right on. Okay, last question, Nate. What's your favorite movies? How would you describe yourself when it comes to the big screen or the small screen?
Yeah. I love good storytelling and I love character development.
Hmm.
Obviously, there are certain franchises that were formative for me. The Indiana Jones series was huge for me growing up.
Yes.
Star Wars, obviously, a big deal for me growing up. A lot of historical films were really big for me growing up. My parents kind of introduced us. My dad's always been a great lover of history, and he knew one of the ways to get us hooked on history was to find something that was entertaining to do so. So there's a mini series called North and South that was made in the 80s.
The Civil War.
Yeah, it was an amazing deal. But the basic premise is you had a guy from South Carolina who was a slave owner and a guy who was an industrialist from Pennsylvania, and they go to West Point at the same time in the 1840s, and they become best friends. And it's just watching their lives unfold as the country's torn apart, as they try to maintain their friendship, maintain their relationships. There's even intermarriage between the two families as time goes on, and then the war splits them all apart, and you're just dealing with all of that and then the aftermath of it as well. And it was one of those things that got me. Also grew up watching the original Roots miniseries, both of those, Roots and Roots the Next Generation, phenomenal. And really, I watched them at ages that were not appropriate. I mean, when I think back at it, my oldest son is 7, and by this time we're watching this, and I mean, there are issues of rape and brutality and mutilation, all kinds of things. But we watched this, and because my parents were like, this is important. Like, you need to see.
This isn't fiction.
This is what happened. You know, these are the things that happened. And so those were really formative for me. But I would have to say probably one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time, I always have to give him a minor shout out to It's a Wonderful Life, because that movie is just great. And I love Jimmy Stewart.
We
had
covered
this
that back
discussion.
in Christmas.
But probably one of my hands down, I will stop and watch this movie through to the end all the time, is Mr. Holland's Opus.
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's why am I forgetting his name? Richard Dreyfuss. There it is. It's Richard Dreyfuss.
Jaws.
And has phenomenal makeup in it, oddly enough, because they start him off as a 20-something, and he was already, I think, in his late 50s when they filmed this movie.
Wow.
And progress him, and you'd never know. I mean, he just looks phenomenal the whole way through. But it's a story of a musician who becomes a music teacher at a high school as a fallback position, and watching him through 3 decades of falling in love with what he does. And it's a family story. It's a coming of age story. It's just phenomenal. Great character development. It's funny. You'll cry, you'll laugh. It's all those things. So that's
School
one of my
of Rock
favorites.
just stretched out over years.
School of Rock, but longer.
Yes. I would say
With more tears.
School of Rock was a light pun off of what this originally
there
was,
ever
because that
in it
movie
a
came out
line-
in like 94, 95.
Right.
Is there a line in it about, all of your kids have touched me, and I think I've touched all of your kids?
I think I've touched them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb, so it's quite a ways away from the top 250.
Yeah.
But still an excellent movie by
Yeah.
that metric.
Yeah,
So.
it's a bit of a sleeper.
I need to-
A lot
I
of
need to
people
watch
missed
this.
it, but I highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. So again, character driven is my thing, and I feel like even you look at the Star Wars franchise, you look at even Indiana Jones. If you watch them chronologically, not the way they were released, you see his character development. Character development is huge for me, and even though I'm jumping the gun on this is why I was not a huge fan of the sequel trilogy for the Star Wars series. It felt right, but it tasted funny, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't. That doesn't make sense to
I have
me.
not
I'm
licked,
surprised
I have
on
not
the-
licked the Blu-rays.
Yeah,
yet.
I'm
Let's
talking.
try that.
I'm talking in terms of the visuals. Like the look was right.
Gotcha.
Like all that stuff
Yeah.
was there, but the typical.
heart.
I didn't care about anybody in those movies except for the people they kept killing off.
We haven't even
Well,
heard your favorite TV show, though. Firefly.
Firefly.
It's a great show.
Firefly is my favorite TV show.
A single
because,
season released out of order, and so it had no continuity
No.
as it released, and people were like, "I don't get this," and
Yeah.
it failed.
And I was one of those people. I saw previews for it, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is, and I never watched it until 10 years after it had been canceled. And then
Yeah.
I bought it on DVD, and I was like, how did this ever
Yeah.
happen?
And then the movie that came out,
Serenity.
it's not good in my opinion.
It was an attempt.
Yeah, they tried.
Yeah, they tried, and I applaud them for that try. But it was just the pace was too fast. There was too much going on
Yeah,
too quickly.
a solid E for effort.
Yes, and it was nice to see them all on the screen together again.
Yeah,
So the nostalgia factor was good.
It's the same cast. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't like a redo.
Nope, entirely the same. It was
Okay.
It's
so
like
Fox
a-
aired the episodes out of order, and then
Fox butchered it.
and then was like, "Oh, these reviews aren't great. We're canning it." So it's all Fox's fault that we didn't get an incredible space
Fox,
western.
if you're listening, we'd
But
still
I mean,
allow you to be a sponsor.
Eventually, Disney gave us a great space western for a season and a half.
And yet, I will say, there's a part of me that's grateful that it only went as long as it did.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have to, none of the drama that was going to come along with a successful show ever had a chance to happen.
Yeah.
The cast loved each other. They still love each other. It was just, you felt that chemistry. And the thing I love about that show the most is that everybody in it is competent at something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have Zoe, who is like
They all have
not
a
your
role.
not your current stereotypical girl boss, where it's like, I do everything. It's like, no, she was, not very emotional, not very connected in those ways, but
Yeah.
she could go in and fight and go to the ground with anybody and beat them. And you had her husband, who's like this kind of wimpy dude, but in terms of flying as a pilot, he is extremely competent. Everybody else will be panicking. He'll be steady. He'll be calm. Everybody has a role, and they all bring something to the table in that.
Yeah.
With nobody ever outshining each other. It just worked so well. And I just watched it again recently, and I want to watch it again now because it's just great.
It's very Star Wars without your Jedi.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the early articles that was reviewing that said something to the effect of, whoever wrote this show clearly worshipped at the altar of Han Solo. And I think
Yeah,
that's such a great,
wrong.
that's such
Yeah.
a great quote. And it's so true. It's so true.
Right on.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so there you
strong
go.
argument.
That's good.
Linked below where you can find that online.
All right. So, again, to recap, Oh, Nelson,
Keep going.
you look like you were about to
I am.
whack me. I thought you were on whack
No, I
me.
was going to say before we get into production notes, I have something.
Oh, well, I was going to get into production notes.
Okay, well, before we get into
production
notes, I was discussing this with Nate and Sheldon out of the episode, but you weren't here for it yet, which is great because I can get your raw reaction.
Oh.
So, do you ever say something
all the time,
and then for years you lay awake at night thinking, "Really wish I hadn't said it like that. I'm an idiot." But you also know that the people that you said it to probably don't remember and probably will never remember, and they're not laying awake at night thinking about how much of an idiot you are.
Yeah.
So the first time Nate and Sheldon had me on their podcast,
Oh, is this a confession?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
It was also the first time Nate and I had met.
Yes. Okay.
Sheldon and I worked together at the time. He invited me on for their show. Was that the Dungeons and Dragons episode?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had me on to explain what Dungeons and Dragons was, which took 2 episodes.
We didn't know.
No, and we were talking about the Satanic Panic as well. We were talking about moral panics and Dungeon and Dragons.
And those episodes are linked below. I recommend strongly to go back and check those out because I think that whole era is really interesting. Nate and Sheldon had some really interesting insights on that too.
From my sheltered Mennonite
uninformed opinions.
Uninformed opinions,
The
shooting
best
from
kind.
the hip. And I had thorough notes in history. Anyway, Nate opens up the episode with, "Nelson, tell us a bit about yourself." And I was like, "I'm a social media." and Nate's like, "Tell me more about that." And then my mind went blank. I was like, "Why did I say that? Those weren't the words I wanted to say. What did I even mean? I don't know. Let's just keep going." And then at the end of the recording, Nate's like, "Hey, if there was anything in there that you didn't want in, let us know." And I was like, "No, it was all gold."
Yeah, and this was 2.5 hours later.
Yeah. So I'd totally forgotten. The episode comes out and I hear it and I was like, "Oh my goodness, why did I say that? What does that even mean? That's not who I am."
It's who you've become, though.
Laying awake at night thinking about what that means and what I was saying and what I said and what I think I meant to say is, I think what I meant to say is I'm a pop culture which I just love all things pop culture.
Yeah.
But it just came out real sideways.
Yeah.
I mean, pop culture thought you were already starting on the wrong foot, but it just came out real funky.
I didn't think any less of you.
There's going to be a lot of
media
edited quacks in there to cover up my own language.
That's fantastic.
Pop culture and social media are not the same thing.
No, they are not.
No.
Unfortunately.
So, let's get into let's do a handbrake conversation change into Star Wars.
Jake break here. All right. Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. As previously mentioned, this was released in 1983.
Right.
It's the third of the original trilogy, created by George Lucas. This one was directed by Richard Marquand, which who I just recently heard passed away soon after.
Our condolences to the family.
Yeah, this movie released. It's rated PG. It's about 2 hours and 11 minutes. It's 8.3 on the IMDb. Out of 10 scale. It's currently, as recording this episode, it's number 89 on the top 250. And on the Rotten Tomatoes, it's 83 tomato meter and 94 audience. And just to compare the other two, just because we're doing this, this is of the three, this is the lowest ranked.
Interesting.
So the highest ranked is Empire Strikes Back, and they progressively get lower. But they're all in the top 100. But this was not the most of the three. This was the least well received.
How would you rank the original trilogy, Nate?
I would go Empire, Jedi, and A New Hope.
Same.
I think that George Lucas's poor directing skills show through in A New Hope.
Yeah, and then they come back again in the prequels.
Right. And Empire
all over again.
and Empire was perfect. It was just
it's
perfect.
a great movie.
Yeah, and all you need to know it was perfect is that when George Lucas went through and added all of that junk to the special editions, he barely touched that one. Yeah, I think I'm okay with everything he chose to do in Empire because it didn't change anything in the lore or the story. He expanded the vision of what he originally intended to do, and I was okay with that.
Yeah, the special edition stuff that he added to Return of the Jedi, like switching for Hayden Christensen, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it brought it into the story.
But everything else is it's bad.
Yes.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
All the times they switch on the who shot first, like it's been changed 2 times now.
Yeah,
in A New Hope. Yeah,
it's just leave it alone.
Yeah, A New Hope was the one I think they messed up the most.
Yeah.
I think that what they did to Jedi was the most pointless, if that makes sense.
The celebration at the end.
The celebration at the end.
Singing at Jabba's palace.
Yeah,
the addition of the.
I actually liked the celebration at the end, but I'll get into that later because we'll expand on this, I'm sure.
Okay, I didn't know that the singing part was added later.
Yeah,
I thought
there was a singing part.
I thought the CGI was just redone.
No.
Okay,
it was a short
musical
sequence.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
All transparency, I finished this movie today. So
for the first time?
No. Just for the
He's watched
for the podcast. I've seen
anytime a new Star Wars comes out, he watches the entire franchise.
Yeah, we try to go through the series.
I'm okay with
like
that.
a normal person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not at all a psychopath.
No, I do those kinds of things. So
they're just tendencies, Nelson. They're just tendencies.
While we're on confessions, in preparation for this podcast, I watched Empire Strikes Back.
Wait, accidentally watched the wrong movie, or you watched both?
No,
Okay.
I did. I only watched Empire. No, I literally thought we were talking about Empire.
We'll allow it.
And then I'm like, no, they had another guest in the meantime on my way here. And I'm like, why did it say episode 5? And so I have watched this movie within the last couple of years because obviously me and Rylan went through it together. So I have watched this movie, just not
as fresh as
extremely recently.
All right. Well, you could pull up the IMDb page and be scrolling through it.
Already done.
Just chipping in with random trivia. Hey, did you guys
know? No.
Sheldon loves his did you knows.
Yes,
my memory of this movie is going to be relatively foggy.
That's okay. We'll spur you on with things. That's how it'll work.
The only other tidbit we need to add then is the budget. Nelson, do you have the budget for this movie?
These 3 movies were made over the course of about 6 years. The first one, budget of $11 million. Second one, budget of $18 million. This one, budget of $32.5 million. So
you can really tell that extra half.
Really comes through. And then since then, there's been 203% inflation caused by money printing going burr. So that brings us to $98.5 million.
Still not huge,
which is not an expensive movie by today's standards, but that is a lot by 1983 standards.
Right. That's all the production facts. So I don't think I have anything else before we get into the bee's knees here.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Unless, Nate, do you have Star Wars trivia about production of Return of the Jedi that you want to chime in?
Yeah.
Lando's bandolier switching sides has always bothered me from the time I was 5 years old and I saw it for the first time. That's all I got.
I don't know what are you talking about?
There's a scene right before they go off, and Han's going to go to Hoth. He's going to go to Endor, take out the shield generator.
Okay.
Lando's going to go and lead the attack group to attack.
He's got the Millennium Falcon.
And he's there, and he's got a bandolier across his chest. And then it cuts to Harrison Ford, and then when it cuts back to Billy D. Williams, it's on the other side. But I think what they did is they actually flipped the negative for whatever reason. I forget why. I think he ended up facing the wrong way in the shot. And then they cut back to Harrison Ford, and then when they cut back to Billy D. Williams, it's back on the other side again.
That's great.
And as a little kid, that was the first ever time I remember noticing, like, they screwed something up in post there. I didn't know what it was called. I wouldn't have said those words, but now that I know it, I'm like, yeah, they jacked something up there.
I didn't catch that.
So yeah, next time you watch it, in that scene when
That's
when they're giving the the soldier goodbye right before. That's
when he tells.
That's it.
I love
That's
you.
all I got.
I know.
I have
No, that's
the
an Empire.
bromance.
I love that line. That's my favorite.
It's a callback to Empire. That I know.
Sheldon with
saw.
So I was like, I know that one.
I watched that part. Yeah.
I remember that line. So
I'm just here for comic relief.
So Endor, the moon of Endor, was filmed in Washington Redwoods, and I meant to cover this when we did A New Hope.
Well, it's too late now.
But Yavin Rebel Base is the Tikal ruins in Guatemala, which I've been to, and I have pictures. Like I have several pictures in my home that when people come, they're like, "Are those the Yavin ruins from Star Wars?" I was like, "Well, yes, but no."
Can we post those?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
cool.
get those up.
That'd be great to
get those
post.
up. Yeah. My
That's awesome.
sister-in-law took them. They're beautiful photos.
We'll be the judges of that.
And yes, internet, judge my sister-in-law's photos. How could this go wrong? And then this is not so much like a production note, but it's also not specifically about the movie, but it has to do with when the movie came out. Are you guys all familiar with How I Met Your Mother?
Yes.
Do you remember what Barney Stinson called the Ewok line?
I do not.
So there's one girl he's dating, and she doesn't think the Ewoks are cute. She dislikes them. She thinks they're annoying. And he says that this is proof positive that she is older than she told him she was, because anybody that was 10 years old or younger when this movie came out likes Ewoks. Well, it turned out that she just hadn't seen it until she was an adult.
Okay.
But that raises the question, do you guys like the Ewoks?
I'm glad you asked this. I guess this is a production note as well.
This is the reason
in
we're
the
here.
original layout for this, the original treatment for this, it was going to be Wookiees. They were going to be on. They were going to be on Kashyyyk.
Oh man, that would have been so much better. I love Wookiees.
And honestly, if you had transplanted that and put the Ewoks into episode 3 and put the Wookiees into episode 6, I would have been happy with that.
Yeah.
Seeing Yoda with all the Ewoks hanging out, that would have even made sense. Like, we're going to send our little guy to talk to the little guys to help them work it out. You know what I'm saying?
You're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
right now.
So originally it was, but he could not figure out how to, because it was so labor intensive at that time to create Chewie's costume.
Right.
I mean, that's every single hair laced in, all the
So how do we
animatronics.
make a bunch of
It was
these?
just like, how do we even do that? And the Ewoks obviously were much simpler.
Yeah.
They just stuck them in, woolly pajamas and gave them a
Were they
semi-animatronic.
kids?
No, they were almost all
Midgets.
little people. They were almost all little people.
Wow.
Dwarves.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, dwarves. Except they weren't mythical creatures.
Short people. As
Nate has
Little-
already said little people. Keep
little-
searching for the word.
I'm just using all the other ones.
But I
There
think
was
of
no-
Nelson's
that. I think of
making
that.
sure we got
I think
all
of that
the
Ralphie
terms.
May joke though, because he talks about that. He's like, little people. He's like, that's not specific enough. Do you mean a child? Do you mean and not dwarfs? Because dwarfs aren't mythical creatures. Does he have an axe? No, he does not have an axe.
Little
Are
Rascals.
you familiar with Randy Newman's song?
Short people.
Yeah.
It's from the movie
yeah.
Little Rascals. Yeah.
No, that's in Little Rascals.
It's definitely in Little
Okay,
Rascals.
that's not from Little Rascals.
Okay, but
They
it's in
used
Little
it.
Rascals.
So he wrote this song, and he wrote it in like the late 60s, early 70s, and it was supposed to be exposing how foolish and silly racism is.
Yeah.
But people just didn't get it and just thought it was a really offensive song because the chorus is short people got no reason to live. It's got the line that they got little arms and little eyes, and they go walk around telling great big lies. I don't want no short people around me.
I forgot about
Linked
that song.
linked below. It's one of my favorite songs because it's so hilariously offensive, and it's done for a point, and just nobody got it.
That's fantastic. It was used well though in the Little Rascals.
It works in Little Rascals.
It does.
Anyway, but yeah, so it was originally supposed to be Wookiees,
That's incredible.
which I think would have been a way better buy-in and would have made more sense seeing Wookiees taking out all the things. But of course, George Lucas had some
And
big,
more emotional investment too, because
Right.
you got
Right.
Chewbacca.
Right. It ended up being a very convoluted. He had explanations as to why this worked better and the idea of, the primitive overcoming the
Yeah.
technological. And I'm like, you're just pulling that out of your butt now after the fact. But
He has
So, no,
a long
I'm not-
history of retroactively
Right.
changing things. Another reason he's given for that is because he wanted to be more kid friendly. Because
Right.
the first two movies he'd gotten feedback that it was too dark, but you just had this Jabba's palace scene.
Right.
I
I
don't
was going to
believe
say,
No.
how is
Yeah.
this kid friendly?
yeah. But I liked the Ewoks as a kid because
Yeah.
it just didn't register to me not to like them. And then when I started seeing it as a teenager, I'm like, oh, they're teddy bears. Like, why are we
Yeah.
doing this? But
I don't hate them. I think they're cool.
But I will say
like
one of my favorite weird little things that happens in any Star Wars movie happens because of the Ewoks. And there's this time when 3PO is telling the story and he's doing all the sound effects. And I swear to you, one of the Ewoks, they cut to him and you hear him go, "That guy's wise," like in this like Peter Griffin-y type thing. I will show it to you afterwards. It is the weirdest thing.
It's linked below.
Yeah, but you'll
Check
see
it
them
out.
all chatting and you're hearing their gibberish. Then one of them goes, "That guy's wise." Like that's literally what you hear. and so if nothing else, the Ewoks were worth that, and I'm happy about that.
What about you, Sheldon? You didn't see them until you were an adult. What do you think of the Ewoks?
I thought they were corny in my opinion, but not weird. Like they
It's
fit
Star
in with the
Wars.
rest of the
Right.
universe. It wasn't as blatant as like porgs. To me, like porgs are useless and they're just there to be cute and sell toys.
Yeah.
The Ewoks
And
at
get eaten by
least
Chewbacca.
Which I
served
did
a
love that.
purpose.
There was a
that was great.
long time in my life that I thought Ewoks were just Jawas that you could see their faces.
I could see that.
For the long, because like same stature, I was just like, okay, they're just inhabiting two different planets.
Yeah.
Like they've adapted differently. I thought they were the same creatures.
Yeah.
They don't use human language.
If you're a biologist, please get back to us.
Yeah,
Jawas are very furry.
Yeah, so yeah,
Man, you saying that now makes me think. I wonder what percentage
Of Jawas are Ewoks? Probably zero.
No, what percentage of little people, in terms of like a film demographic, have been in Star Wars? Like that is like because they have used a lot of little people in Star Wars.
At this point, probably lower, but around 1984, probably 100%.
Yeah, I mean,
was probably
Willow
contractually
had come
required.
out previous to that, I believe. Or did it? No, it came
Willow
out
came out after,
Yeah, it
but
came
he
out
was
after.
in this.
Yes, he was. He was Wicket.
He's the first one she meets. Yeah,
Warwick Davis.
Warwick
Davis.
Yeah, who's still kicking.
Yeah, but they did cancel his show on Disney Plus.
Good.
After one
It's not
season.
his
I didn't
show.
watch it. It was his show.
But he was
He
almost
was the
like
reason
not
that-
even the star of his own show.
Of course he wasn't, because that's all anybody does anymore. But
Right.
again,
Anywho,
Which
That's
is
another
midget
thing.
erasure.
all right.
Or little people erasure.
What moral implications did this movie have? What biases, truth claims? Let's get into it. What did Star Wars have to tell us
So
in The Return of the Jedi?
I thought this one isn't so much a bias, but it's just a really interesting way that they primed the audience to feel a certain way about something with background characters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when Vader's first getting off of his ship and he's landed in the new Death Star, he's talking to the captain or whatever his title is, who's managing the construction of the new Death Star, and they're walking past a bunch of men in military uniform. And the camera is going past Vader, focusing on him, and now they're walking past a bunch of guys that are in uniform, but they kind of look schlubby. They got weird facial hair. They're out of shape. And he says, I assure you, Lord Vader, my men are working as fast as they can. And then the camera switches, so it's looking past him at Vader, and behind Vader are all the stormtroopers. And he says, perhaps I can find new ways to motivate them. And it's like you've got kind of a guy who's unconvincing in how hard he's working, and then you've got a guy who's just going to use force, and the background characters are reflecting that. And I just thought that was a really cool editorial choice.
Yeah, no, that's great. And obviously, this is the first time where we get to see the real villain of the entire franchise in Palpatine. First time we experience. Now we do get the little clip of him in Empire.
The first time we get him in person.
We get a hologram.
But this is
of him,
the first time we actually get the full-fledged experience.
Is it Ian McDermott? Is it always been the same actor?
No, in the original cut of Empire,
Okay.
it was actually a composite of a woman and this weird alien face. If you go to the original cut,
in Empire,
it was totally. And then they changed it out and put Ian McDermott in it.
Once he was in,
Yes.
Well,
But it
okay.
is him in Return of
It
the
is him in
Jedi.
Return
Yes,
of the Jedi.
but
Okay.
Return of the Jedi, that's him all the way through.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of him as a villain?
perfect.
Yeah.
He's perfect
He's
because
like the pinnacle of movie
because
villains.
he seems non-threatening, but he was just unsettling.
And no redeeming qualities.
Yeah, nothing. There's nothing about him that made you like him, but yet you're fascinated by him at the same. He was a perfect villain.
And you're never fully aware of his motives.
No.
And even going back to the prequel trilogy when they
Right.
did expand
Right.
on his story, like you're still going, but why?
Yeah,
He's just, and even at the end of the sequel trilogy, like
Right.
you're still going, but why?
Right.
Like he's an enigma.
right. But in the end, it's just raw power.
Yeah.
Like that's what it comes down to, which again is even in terms of politics now, and in terms of United States politics, like that is where we're at. It's like it's all power. And it is incredibly corrupting.
Yeah.
So
it's raw power, but the monstrous part of him is that way he uses bureaucracy and the way he uses freedom and the way he uses the illusion of choice up until he is going to ask you for something.
Yeah.
And then there's no option.
Right.
He will remove the actual choice when it affects his ultimate plan, but give you the freedom to feel like you're making a difference or not making a difference.
You feel like you have action,
right? And the whole like galactic republic
Yeah.
thing, and the way he manipulates that's the monstrous part. Like, and some of that comes later. You don't see it all in episode 6, but
well, and it's interesting though too that you mentioned that, because I've fairly recently watched all of these movies again because I introduced my son to them. And I realized that all in all, Revenge of the Sith is actually a phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
I used to just be kind of disappointed.
it's my
with
favorite of all.
But
of them.
it really is. And I
It's my
realized, speaking particularly to the issue of Palpatine, I still watch that movie and expect and want Anakin to make a different choice. Like any movie that can invest you in that, even though you know the outcome, that's
done.
good. That's well done. There's still some cheese in it, but whatever. But I came to the realization,
even though you want to make a different choice, the choice he makes is still believable.
right?
Which is
and
if
that
only
was the
you had
thing.
known about Force Heal, it could have helped
Yeah.
a lot.
I just won't even talk about that.
Of course, that'd not be a thing the Jedi would tell you about.
But the thing is I realized watching it this round that Anakin didn't actually make a choice to follow Palpatine.
No.
His choice was, I have to keep this guy around, and so I'm going to take out Mace Windu.
Yeah.
And that was how he goes from what have I done to, okay, fine, I'll just submit to your... Like, he had
I'm
no
committed
options.
now. Yeah.
He had no options. And it was a knee-jerk reaction, and then he had to deal with the fallout. And of course, then the things that he did were despicable following that. But he was, the whole time, it was deception, and he got boxed in.
Yeah.
Until he's standing there slaughtering younglings.
Yeah.
I want to push back on something that you said, which is what you said is true, but it doesn't apply to Palpatine, and what does apply to him is even more important. You had said that, you know, what we see with our own empire in America is how power corrupts, and that's true.
Yeah.
Power does corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But Palpatine wasn't corrupted by power.
No.
He pursued power, right? And when you centralize power, it makes it all the more easy for one person to secure it. Right. And that's what we see through the prequel trilogy.
That's a good point.
Which, you know, the original trilogy, you don't have all that context.
Right.
But even just with the context we do have, we see that this is a guy that more than anything, he wants power.
Right.
Yeah.
Unlimited power.
Right. And that's what I was actually going to say. My thing would be, it was his desire and pursuit of power that corrupted him. It wasn't getting it.
Right.
It was that was everything. That was all he wanted. That was his goal, period.
Oh, well,
was to be
actually,
more
if you get
powerful
into
then.
the extra stuff, he was always like that.
But anyway, no, I've always loved him as a villain.
Yeah.
He's the guy you love to hate, and you love to see him bite it at the end of that. It was just the best.
Yeah, too bad he makes all those clones. Again.
I just refuse to
Of himself,
participate
again.
in the sequel trilogy at all. I refuse to acknowledge their existence anymore. I've watched all 3 of them in theaters. I haven't seen them since.
I think it's really funny because we haven't had the opportunity to listen to it yet, Nate, but our last guest, he's literally wrote a book on worldview in Star Wars. And when we asked about the sequel trilogy, he's like, I made the decision because when he left episode 9, he was like
Furious.
incredibly frustrated.
Yeah.
And he's like, I made the decision that I am a Star Wars fan, and this is the decisions that they made, and I'm going to figure out a way to enjoy it. And for me, it was almost like listening to a Catholic who just heard something that he couldn't agree with ex cathedra.
Right.
And he's like, okay, well, I have to make this work now.
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
super
And the thing
committed.
is, I don't have to because I can read the novelizations that were canon for all of my life up until these last
I
few
agree
months,
with you, right? This is all fiction.
Yeah.
I just think it's really interesting. Like, and you're both very much Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
Like,
I won't let my son watch the sequels. I told him when he's old enough he can decide to watch them himself, but he's not going to watch
Not
them
under
with me.
my roof.
No, but I told him, I said because they're not well written, the characters aren't good. I said I don't think there's anything.
Well, not well written and characters aren't good kind of throws out the whole Star Wars franchise.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And I was like, and the thing that I try to redeem with him, because like I agree, like there are many things in the movies that I could go, what the heck were you thinking?
Yeah.
But like I'm the same thing. Like if I ruin one movie in any franchise, well, we're talking Marvel, Harry Potter, like whatever it is. If I ruin one movie, the whole thing's tainted. I use the word taint. Sorry, guys. But like so for me, like I had to find redeeming things in it, and like the visualizations are beautiful. It's a beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
And I know I've said this in the previous episodes, but like I do like the characters. I think Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, like I like them. The whole Snoke thing is dumb.
Yeah.
Snoke's dumb. Palpatine's dumb. Rey being a Palpatine is dumb.
See, and here's the thing though.
Rey being a Skywalker is even dumber.
Yeah.
She should have been a
Technically
Kenobi.
not a
I
Skywalker.
liked those
That would've been
characters
bad.
in the first movie.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, yeah, there's too much mirroring, too much
Right.
fan service. But I'm like, these people have potential.
Yeah.
The moment I knew that it was going to be what it was
when they told you on screen.
No.
Let
The
him
moment I
finish.
knew that it was going to be a problem was when they specifically zoomed in on Finn and he's holding Anakin/Luke's lightsaber and he turned it on with the red button, which has never in all of Star Wars lore been the actuator that turns on that lightsaber.
I've never
It's
known that.
it's the strip that was on all the lightsabers had that
The
one
long
little
strip.
long strip, and that's what turns it on. Every toy,
I never knew
every licensed product, and he pushes that red button, and I'm like, no fan misses that. Like no fan.
Oops.
And
Chef,
so that's
you're not
where
a
I
fan.
just
I'm not a fan.
no, but I mean in the sense of
Yeah.
like if you're creating
Right.
this,
Yeah.
Right.
like
You're
you're
gonna get this
not.
right.
And I was
Right.
just like
No, I agree.
I remember my breath caught, and I even said in the theater, like, that's not how you turn that on.
Right.
Like, what just, and he used a lightsaber with no thing, but he never has any force power. So in that first movie, they leave you hanging on a lot of things where you're like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe we're going to see where these go. And they just squandered all of it.
Now, I won't sit in this camp too long just because there's,
Yes,
there's
this
plenty,
isn't where we're
plenty more
going.
time. It's like the second one, the second one of the new trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I can't remember the name. I haven't watched these ones in a
Yeah,
while.
so The
but
Force
I'm-
Awakens and then
Last
The Last
Jedi.
Jedi.
Last Jedi.
Rise of
So, like,
Skywalker.
that's the one where I feel like for a lot of people, it's polarizing. That's the one I enjoyed the most.
Oh.
Here's why, and here's why. Because the first one was so predictable in the fact that they're recreating all these different
Fair.
like it was so refreshing to watch a movie within this universe and go, oh, I bet you this is gonna, I bet you this is gonna. That whole movie, you couldn't predict it because it was so left turn.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. Again, there were still some things I'm going, okay, that's weird, but all the movies have cheese in it.
Yeah.
So
I had a lot
I
of fun
was
with it. I just wish Ryan Johnson hadn't intentionally
Right.
undone the things
Right.
that his predecessor had done.
I was able to get past the cheese, but I really enjoyed, I legitimately enjoyed the fact that I was not able to predict that movie.
That's fair.
Whereas in the first one, I was like, oh, I see where, okay, this is pretty easy to see where it's going. It's like, that was very refreshing to me. And I still enjoy that to this day.
Yeah.
Being that it's atypical to where the first one was.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some weird choices made still.
Yeah.
Well,
Nonetheless.
all that said, let's talk about Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
So,
I was going to say, so
This was bound to happen.
in Return of the Jedi, you get something that you've been rooting for since the Empire, where the big reveal is that you find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father, right? As soon as you find that out, you want to see the redemption arc of Darth Vader.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because there's no redeeming quality that's showed to you up until that point.
Yeah.
But as soon as you see that him and Luke have a connection, you're like, well, maybe there's this
Right.
possibility that
Yeah.
there's a bond that exists. Maybe there's a human inside of it, inside of that suit, that kind of thing. And this
He's more machine than man now.
Which is one of my Luke's response to that is one of my favorites. He looks at him from a certain point of view, like just that indignant. I'm like, exactly.
I want to get back to that line, but go ahead. What were you saying,
That's
Sheldon?
gonna come back up.
This is like that redemption of Darth Vader wouldn't be normal in all stories that are told, but this one I appreciate that they actually did
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They did it well in that Palpatine is a perfect villain. The way that ended was why this movie is so highly
And you
rated.
realize he
like you
is
could
the
have
villain.
they could have messed it up.
Right.
They could have messed this up any number
throughout
of
all the
ways.
rest of it, Darth Vader was the villain.
Right.
You heard about the Emperor, but Darth Vader was the villain. And then in this one, you realize, oh, wait, he's not actually the villain.
Darth Vader is not the Empire.
No.
He's not the
In
Emperor.
this-
He's not.
This scenario is one of the issues that I have with the new trilogy.
Yeah.
Right.
I was so wanting
Right.
Kylo Ren to die a villain.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like, I just wanted him to stay
Yeah.
bad the whole time. My wife and I were like, it's going to happen. He's going to just,
Yeah.
again, redemption again. Like,
Yeah.
we've seen this before. So
My
like,
thing,
I
I said out loud in the theater,
wanted-
please don't kiss.
yeah.
And then they did.
Yeah,
And I
I
was
really
like,
wanted Kylo to
come
just
on.
stay till the end.
So
Yeah.
I think Vader's got a great redemption arc in these three movies. So does Han Solo.
Yeah.
Han Solo goes from being, here, hold on, I have some notes on this that were, I used ChatGPT for some assistance here.
Not a sponsor.
So at the beginning of the original trilogy, Han is a selfish smuggler who is only concerned with his own interests. However, as the story progresses, he becomes more selfless, learns to care about others, and this is highlighted in his decision to come back and help Luke in the Battle of Yavin, as well as his willingness to risk his life to save Leia and the rebels in the Battle of Endor. And as we talked about with Stephen Kent, when you had that iconic line of "I love you, I know," that's way more emotional than we culturally treat it as. And then it gets that great mirroring in this one, which with Leia saying "I love you" and him saying "I know." No, sorry, that was the original one, and then it gets reversed. And so
scratch that, reverse it.
Scratch that, reverse it.
I was going to say that if you didn't.
So he has a much more, in my opinion, a much more emotionally fulfilling redemption arc than Vader does. Vader's redemption, in my opinion, feels kind of ham-fisted, feels kind of like shoehorned into the storyline.
See, but I'm
glad they do it. I just think it could have been done better.
But here's the thing I think about that. This is the first movie that we get to see Anakin Skywalker in. And we don't see him when they take the mask off. The first time we see Anakin Skywalker is them talking right before he takes Luke to the Emperor, right after he's surrendered. It's just the two of them having that conversation. And you hear that intensity of that name no longer has any meaning for me. And that you hear this dialogue go on between them, and you can hear the conflict that's in him. And again, this is when you realize you're not the bad guy. And one thing I will say, even though I was one who kind of crapped on the prequel trilogy initially, and I still have a major problem with the Phantom Menace. I don't think it needs to exist.
I like it.
I recommend to people generally
the machete order.
I do the modified machete order, which is you watch New Hope, Empire, then you go back and as a quote flashback, you watch
Attack of the Clones,
Revenge of the Attack of the Clones, and then Revenge of the Sith. You just ignore Phantom Menace altogether, and then you watch Jedi as a wrap up to the whole
Even all
thing.
the Palpatine stuff, you don't think that's valuable
because he's already established by the time you get there. He's kind of nothing significant really happens that is not fulfilled just by the second two movies.
I disagree.
Give it.
In
the
Phantom
Gungans.
No, in Phantom Menace. Well, there's that. I think the Gungans get crapped on a lot. And I think
Liam Neeson was phenomenal in that movie.
Liam Neeson's phenomenal. Maul, I think, has a lot more significance than people give it credit for.
Later, yes.
And even if you skip the extra stuff, I just think he brings a lot of weight to that movie. But specifically, within that movie, you have Palpatine already beginning political machinations. And I think that I think the whole picture of it is really valuable to see how brilliant this guy is at a political level.
And the fact that he's on this obscure little planet of Naboo and all that. Like, there are certain little aspects of his character. I would say that would probably be the only redeeming arc in that for that movie for me.
I like the machete order. I just think that you should leave Phantom Menace in. You watch New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, go watch your prequels, then you wrap up the original trilogy.
And the pod race is fun.
The pod race is fun, man. It's a fun movie.
Nice
it is fun.
And what people always forget is the target market for these movies is 12-year-old boys.
That was not marketed to the original. I mean, they knew the original people that grew up with the original children were going to watch it, but that was not their market when this.
No. Target market for every Star Wars movie is a 12-year-old. Well, except for the new ones, 12-year-old boy. Right? Like that's.
And I forgot, Duel of the Fates is one of the best pieces that John Williams has ever written.
100%. 100%.
So,
anyway, he goes to see Yoda. And I was expecting, and I've seen this, but it's been a long time, so I was expecting more substance there. But Yoda says to him, "No more training do you require. Already know you that which you need." Oh, hideous grammar aside, what do you think about that as kind of like a mentor passing the torch kind of thing? Do you think that that's empowering, or do you think that that's a frustrating thing that if you were to hear that from a mentor?
It could come across a little passive aggressive. You could receive that as like, oh, because it's abrupt.
I'm done with you.
From the last time they met, he left. Luke left abruptly, but he came back. He said, "I will come back," and he did what he said he was going to do. And now Yoda's just like, "You're done.
You're done.
You're done. You did it.
I'm done with you."
I think it
could be passive.
I think it could be passive aggressive, but I think it's handshaking with the truth, because I think Yoda knew that what Luke experienced in Empire with that fight with finding out that Anakin was his father and that Vader was Anakin, or not that Anakin was father, but that Vader was Anakin. I think for him it was like, I had a whole process laid out. You jumped the gun, and now you've got everything that you're going to end up that I can give you. Like you've got everything that you could take away from this.
And even
because
he says
you
in
rushed
that
into
conversation, like, I wish it hadn't happened this way. I'm paraphrasing because
Right.
it's really hard to quote. I wish it hadn't happened this way because you left. Things happened out of order.
Now it's
but
going to be
now
harder.
this is the way it is,
Yeah.
and you basically are ready at this point.
And I just googled it. It take us
4
for
years.
it is. It's 1 year
After Empire,
between him seeing Yoda and then him seeing Yoda again. It is.
Yeah.
There's 1 year that's
so
passed.
it's
Yeah.
New Hope, 3 years, Empire, 1 year,
Yep.
Return of the
Yeah.
Jedi.
And I do wish we knew kind of what Luke was doing in that interim
Yeah.
time. I mean, obviously he was looking for Han. That was
Drinking raw eggs, running up the stairs in Philly.
Well, and they were building the bigger rebellion. I mean, we got our
Right.
first shot
Right.
of Mon Mothma, right?
Yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the first. Like she was supposed to be in an earlier movie.
Right.
They didn't put the clip in.
Oh, by the way, at
but
least
she was in
we
this
now
movie.
have a second female with a name and speaking parts.
That's right. We did
Mon
it, guys.
Mothma.
We did it.
We got there.
So yeah, so we. I mean, I think within that year, I mean, because they had traction. You know,
Yeah.
like they had traction. So and so I think there was just the building of the
Right.
team. Like, it's,
Right.
Yeah. We're putting a team together.
I think that Jedi became a better movie because of the prequel series.
Mhm.
Because
oh
again,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
in
I didn't-
why I
those
say go
first
back.
two
Yeah.
episodes, you don't really see Vader as Anakin, but when you see some of those conversations, like
Yeah.
I'm picturing that Anakin back
Yeah.
there inside that suit, having these conversations, being a part of what's going on,
Yeah.
and so there are many things that I think the prequels made, like that scene where even from A New Hope where Vader says, "I feel a presence, something that I haven't felt since," and I'm
Yeah.
sitting here thinking, "Yeah, Mustafar, when you burn to a crisp, like you
Yeah.
know this guy's here somewhere."
Actually, no.
Not now. I know that changed. I know they keep retconning
do you have
everything.
thoughts about the Obi-Wan series?
I have not watched it yet. Everything I've heard is
It's fine.
I love it.
I love
I'm
it.
like 85%. I watched the Critical Drinker's review of it.
Okay.
If you've not ever heard of him, he's hilarious.
Linked below.
And he nitpicked on some of the things, but overall,
Typical, yeah.
it was an okay review.
It doesn't screw much up because like everything can still work with the stuff that they did change with dialogue stuff from
Right.
Like it doesn't screw much up.
My only beef with it, and this is just from what I know. My only beef with it is it should have been Luke instead of Leia. Because Luke clearly had history with Obi-Wan already.
Old Ben.
And so they
okay.
should have just
the young Leia story.
They should have done something with that, but I get it. They want it to be a girl because
Yeah.
this is the era we live in, and we have to put everybody in the female character. Like
It also it objectively made Obi-Wan a liar in his interaction with Luke in A New Hope at the
Right.
beginning, because
Yeah.
there's things that are said in that conversation which having anything happen while Luke is a child, like it made it a lie.
right,
Now you could say it was a mistake, sure, but now we're only 8 years out because Luke and Leia are like
Twins.
10 at
Right.
yeah,
the movie, right? So now we're only 8 years from A New Hope.
right,
So I had some issues there, but those I can kind of ignore.
yeah,
My gripe with the Obi-Wan series is the villain for that franchise so far, the villain for that season
Yeah.
was unsatisfying, unconvincing villain in my
Yeah.
mind.
yeah.
That's my
Well, and
but I
villains
think
villains have become hard because you can't just have somebody that's a bad guy. We have to make them sympathetic.
And this story wasn't about the villains. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was never about. It was this series, and I'm fanboying over. Like so, I did enjoy it completely. But like that Obi-Wan series was never about Obi-Wan versus a bad guy.
Oh, I know.
It was about expanding that. So it's like
Yeah.
So for me, like the villain met the needs of that show.
Yeah.
Because everything else was much more important.
Mhm.
Him and Anakin, all those flashbacks, him meeting Vader again later. Like
Yeah.
I was gonna
like,
say
that's
even seeing Vader come
that-
on the screen
was
like,
was
the-
There's a lot of
just
cool stuff in that.
phenomenal.
series.
the shot where the half of the helmet's cracked. And
Yeah.
like, you see that duality.
Spoilers,
Yeah.
Nate.
Like that. It's
So good.
It's
Sorry for the
beautiful.
spoilers.
That's
Yeah.
good.
So no-
I already know all of this.
Have you seen
So-
Andor?
No, not yet. I've intentionally waited on
So-
that one.
Very different from most of Star Wars. I think some of the best of Star Wars
It's
in
my
it is
favorite
Andor.
series, is Andor.
I think Mandalorian season 1 and 2 is top tier Star Wars. Best
Yeah.
Star Wars has ever
Book
been.
of Boba Fett was phenomenal.
Book of Boba Fett's great as well.
I haven't seen that one yet.
The
Um,
Cad Bane character
Cad Bane.
is
Cad Bane was
wonderful.
I do want to discuss something that Obi-Wan says in Return of the Jedi.
How dare you come back to our movie?
Well, it's the three of our movie. You watched a different one.
Yeah, any insights you have on Empire, feel free to chime in.
This is
Our
part of the-
movie
But this is
collectively.
part of the beauty of Star Wars is
I mean, that's-
everything informs everything
Right.
else.
It
That's
does.
true.
It does.
That's true.
Except for the sequels.
And this is the last
Except
time
for when we don't like it and then it doesn't.
And this is the last time we'll talk about a Star Wars movie on the podcast, as of right now. So like,
yeah.
So like,
there's
I mean,
nothing else in the top
this
250.
is our last chance to sum up.
There we
everything.
go.
So
Okay, good.
Nothing's off the table. So
In fact, there's a lot on this table. So
it's true.
Obi-Wan appears as a Force ghost on Dagobah, and Luke says, like, why didn't you tell me that he was my father? And Obi-Wan says, Luke, you're going to find many of the truths that we cling to depend greatly on your own point of view. Does that ring true to you guys? Is that a true statement about how the world is? Or is this Obi-Wan weaseling his way out?
I think in context of the religious thinking of Star Wars, the base Taoist style, yes, I think that makes total sense. I don't think that rings true in real life, because there's certain universals that if you divorce yourself from them, it automatically leads to corruption. And I will say that not just from a Christian perspective, but even in the sense of you just see it. You see it in societies, you see it in individuals. If there are certain things that you set aside, it is not going to end well, no matter what your intentions are. The Germans people didn't elect Hitler because they thought he was going to be a monster. They saw redemption, and they were willing to make compromises in order to achieve that redemption.
And sometimes not even compromises.
Yeah,
sometimes
or
like,
ignore.
nope, that makes sense. I'm in.
Yes, all the way through. And so there are certain things where universals that you have to have, like these are the bedrocks of where we go. And in my very strong opinion, at least in the Western world, you don't have Judeo-Christian values. You don't have those things. And I'm not talking strict adherence to the religion, but I mean, even an atheist, like, I'm sorry, your worldview borrows from mine. You can't just talk like your ethic and your view of what's right and wrong has come out of a vacuum.
Right.
It hasn't. Like you have, and I get it. You can say till you're blue in the face that it's just logic is this thing. Well, the rest of the world has not found that logic. You know, being in a Christianized Western world, that is what has informed us of how we treat people, how we treat the poor, how we treat the disenfranchised, how we treat widows.
And I will say though,
things.
as America as a culture, actually, as the West as a culture has continued to abandon God, a lot of those things that 5 years ago even atheists said, of course this is obviously true.
Right.
A lot of those things are becoming, well, that's maybe your heteronormative point of view, right?
Exactly.
So a lot, and I'm not even just talking about same-sex marriage. I'm talking about the way we treat children, the way we treat the poor, the way we treat all kinds of things. In the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a big societal shift on what is and is not morally acceptable.
Right. Yeah.
Which is only further evidence that atheists borrow from religion when they say this is right or this is wrong.
Right. So again, I think everybody's perspective in life matters in the sense that that's what they've experienced. I can't argue with your experience, but I can tell you bedrock truths that trump the experience.
Or bedrock truths, if you give them up, will cause you great harm. And like that what seems like a minor deviation is going to end up at a place where you don't quite expect.
I remember seeing somebody at the height of all the political stuff with Trump and the initial stuff. He posted, he was a pastor guy I love dearly, but he posted this picture of these two people like stick figures ish arguing and pointing at a number, and one of them was saying it was a 6 and one of them was saying it was a 9, and then the caption was something like, oh, life just depends on your perspective. And I typed in the question, I said, what number came before and after it? Because it doesn't matter whether
that's objective,
whether you're standing on the wrong side or not. That's the subjective reality. But if a 10 comes after that, it is a 9.
Right.
If an 8 came before that, it is a 9. That is irrefutable, regardless of what side of that number you're standing on.
Yep.
And I think that's what we miss. Like, we want to be objective and we want to say, oh, everybody's got these different things. And granted, people's life experiences are their experiences, and that perspective matters. But it doesn't change what may or may not be true.
And I think an important qualification here that you and I understand implicitly, but sometimes it's missed by an audience. And that's not, I'm not criticizing our audience. I'm saying, like, even when you're in conversations, when I say
everyone else's audience.
Yeah, the audience for the things
yes,
we say.
There we go.
Our audience is enlightened and
that's
brilliant.
Right,
Two completely different.
No, when we say that morality is black and white, what people sometimes think we mean by that is, and I know which is black and white.
Yeah, no.
Right? And I'm not saying that. I'm saying it is black and white, and I often mess it up.
Yeah.
Right?
We're working that out sometimes.
Exactly. So that statement comes with humility, not with pride. Right? When I tell you that there is good and bad, there is right and wrong,
Right.
That is not a claim that I know it.
Right.
Right. So,
Well, it's like the bedrock truth. Like everybody knows murder is wrong
do they?
inherently, but what is murder?
Yeah.
Is the thing that you'll get into.
Oh, yeah.
As people will say, well, what's murder? What constitutes
Define
murder?
your terms.
So there are those gray. We can have some discussions and we can disagree. But the bedrock reality is, it's like, okay, the target is we understand this is wrong.
Yeah.
Now, what does that look like? And so, again, I know this is getting a little headier than the initial question.
This is exactly
This is
what we do
gold.
here.
Yeah.
But I think there are certain bedrocks that if you abandon, everything falls apart. And specifically to that character question, Obi-Wan wasn't around for anything. He didn't see Anakin's fall. He saw Anakin fallen. He says goodbye to him before he heads off to that planet that I can't remember, with the diamond pit place with all the weird aliens that he ends up killing Grievous in. I can't remember what the name of that place was.
I can't think of it.
But they have a really like bromance moment right there, and it mirrors Han Solo's and
Luke's.
And no, I'm thinking of Han Solo and Lando. Right
Yeah. You're right.
And it kind of mirrors that sense of foreboding. But he wasn't there for any of Anakin's deception and fall. He was there after it was done. So he had no point of view. His point of view was literally what he ended up saying. I saw Anakin here. The next time I saw him, he was not Anakin Skywalker anymore. Something had changed. He didn't see the change. So he only was telling what he knew. His perspective was, I saw my friend, and then I didn't. And that was it. He wasn't around for it.
Yeah.
So you might have gotten a different story from Mace Windu or from
that makes his perspective valid when he says, basically Darth Vader killed your father.
Right.
Like
he didn't
Killed my friend. Yeah.
I feel like he didn't have quite the integrity to say, I don't really know what happened.
That actually,
and so that's how he said it.
That actually is something where Obi-Wan, the TV series, does make this better.
Yeah.
Because they have a face-off. They fight, and you get kind of like, in Iron Man, where you get like the inside the helmet shot. You get that of Anakin a couple times, and they're having this conversation, and Obi-Wan's saying, Anakin, I know you're still in there.
Yeah.
And Anakin's like, no, I've killed him a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think is the line.
Yeah.
And they have this fight that Obi-Wan basically has to run from, because Anakin Skywalker is a more force sensitive, has his midichlorians are off the scale and all that stuff.
Oh, jeez.
That's another reason I don't like the Phantom Menace.
I get why people don't like that. There's nothing in the original trilogy that insinuates that everybody is force sensitive.
Right.
In fact, it's the opposite.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So the midichlorians is just an explanation, a scientific explanation of a natural phenomenon.
I get it.
Sticking on this line about just truth. So my wife's a school teacher. I've mentioned it a couple times, and we all four of us at this table here are of Christian belief and stuff. And a part of me wants to say that there is a struggle out there with this idea that truth is relative. Now, for us here, I don't think anyone disagree at the table that like we do have this moral, not even, there is a faith aspect to it, but not even with the faith aspect included. There is this idea just like, there are these just unalienable truths that we adhere to that are just no-brainers.
Yeah.
The stories my wife will bring home of these students that are great kids, but are just going through so much ish right now. They don't have truths in their life.
Yeah.
Everything it's like I struggle with this because like it's easier for us to go, this stuff makes sense to us. But like there's a lot of people out there that I think I can say that don't know what that is. Like,
right.
and that's heartbreaking. And like, I mean, we're all on this to go super philosophical. We're all on this journey of finding ourselves and finding out like who we're going to become and stuff. Like, but this idea of like, when you don't have that foundation, when you don't even like, again, faith aside, but for us, we include this as part of our faith, but like when we don't have that foundation of what is right, what is wrong, that specific yes and no stuff, there is nothing but gray.
Yeah.
And like, there's
nothing.
Right.
There's just nothing.
Right. And there is an excuse for everything.
Yeah.
Everything can be justified depending on the situation. And it's like, I do wrestle with that. Like, cause like I can think of some specific people that are like, they'd probably disagree with what they're saying. And I can understand why. Yeah. I don't agree with it, but I can understand.
When the stakes are small, like with children, yes, I get it. But at some point as an adult, if you go along that path far enough, somebody's going to define for you right and wrong. Right. And you're going to know when you're out of bounds.
Yeah.
And
even if it may be just for a few seconds before everything's over.
Right. And you will,
And it might not be a law enforcement officer. Like it could just be somebody else who shares your moral grace.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And somebody will call you on it or let you know that you're out of bounds or this is what you've believed your whole life is not true. And one of the ways that my dad broke this down for me simply when I was a teenager was you will learn to respect me at home, but you don't have to. You can learn respect from a teacher at school, but you don't have to. But eventually you will learn respect, and it will probably be a police officer if you don't choose to learn respect now. And somebody's going to define for you right and wrong, like good and bad, truth, and like you can subscribe to a truth claim, but the evidence of whether or not that truth claim is really true, yes, I believe my whole life. This is my truth. This is how I see it. Whether or not that is true will be borne out in the results.
I agree with that.
Well, and I think that's one of the interesting
And then
things.
you'll find out what really is true.
Right. And I think that's one of the interesting things we're seeing with millennials and Gen Z. And obviously we're technically probably what they would term geriatric millennials. We kind of are in that.
I prefer Oregon Trail millennials.
See, there you go.
So
we're not
Trail millennials.
Yeah, we're not Gen X, but we're also not really full on millennials because we kind of caught that at the tail end of the Gen X move.
We're still latchkey kids.
We still had some. We were still raised
Oregon
with
Trail.
some sense of morality.
Yeah.
You know, there was still some of that central. We all kind of have these core values things when we were kids and growing up.
Yeah,
we're seeing the first generations that were completely unmoored from that.
Yeah.
And this is why we're seeing whole cities burning. This is why we're seeing capitals under siege.
Yeah.
Like this is why we're seeing these things. And that there's no consequence for it. Yeah. There's nothing. I mean, there's nothing.
I know I'm going to sound like a broken record on this one, but we always have to come back to, well, what caused that?
Right.
So what caused it that we have now 2 going on 3 generations of people who didn't have strongly defined moral frameworks and understandings of respect? As Sheldon defined, and I think the 3 of us also have the same stories, a lot of that comes from our fathers.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming fatherlessness, although that's a huge aspect.
Yeah.
We have to look at the incentives of what caused fatherlessness.
Yeah.
And there was 2 big things that caused fatherlessness. The first one is first and second wave feminism did incredibly good things to bring about justice for women who didn't have justice. And I want to make that very clear.
Well, it started with Mary Poppins, right?
Yeah.
Votes for women.
Votes for women. But a thing that happened with third and then fourth wave feminism is a concept of men and women are basically the same and we can treat them the same and expect the same things from them. And that's simply visibly not true.
Yeah.
And socionomically not true. And we have all kinds of body of evidence to prove it's not true. And so when we had the big divorce movements, which happened as an effect of the third wave feminism, we had a lot of broken homes. And then women were being told that, no, you have everything that you need to raise a kid.
Right.
Right. And then the government stepped in and said, hey, actually, we're also going to help you financially to raise a kid. And we'll give you more money per kid. So we actually had incentives to marry the government rather than have an actual husband. Right. And we saw from that the people on the edges.
Thomas Sowell has written extensively about this.
Thomas Sowell's done some great writing on this.
We'll put some of his stuff in the
absolutely.
None of it's bad. Below. It's almost all heady, but none of it's bad.
Yeah, that's very true. So Thomas Sowell, brilliant black economist, and Biden said some really horrible things to him when he was a young man.
Yes.
When Biden was a young man in Congress and Thomas Sowell was a young man in universities.
Biden was
some
never
very
a young
racially motivated things from Biden to Thomas Sowell. There's another black economist recently passed.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say Williams.
Yeah, it is Williams. I can see his face, glasses.
Now I'm a believer.
Billy D?
No, not Billy D.
Different Black Williams. Walter Williams.
Walter Williams, that's right.
All right, so Walter Williams, Thomas Sowell, both have written extensively on this, but it's not a uniquely black society thing. In fact, Thomas Sowell does a lot of work talking about that. We see it a lot in Appalachia. Basically, it's a socioeconomic thing.
Yes.
Right? When you create the incentives that the government's going to take care of you if you have kids out of wedlock, what are people who are at the fringes of society going to do? They're going to follow those incentives, and they're going to have kids out of wedlock. And those types of instability, we already knew for decades before that kind of instability are really great markers, not perfect markers because people rise above that, but really great markers for your likeliness to find yourself in criminal behavior, find yourself in drug addiction, which is not necessarily criminal addiction because there's criminal behavior because there's lots of legal drugs and all kinds of different things. Right. So shockingly, in trying to help people, government did a disservice. When has that ever happened before?
Just a couple other times.
I just I really want to clarify that when we're saying that we have two generations now that have wildly different moral values, you got to ask the question why. And government intervention decades ago, we're paying for now.
Can I ask this devil's advocate question here?
No.
So because this, I find this very fascinating because going back history,
I will not be questioned.
So do you think the government knew what they were doing when they offered these help aids? Because what do you think it was done in a sincere? Motive.
I don't remember. There's a series of papers that came out during the slave trade in the United States. I cannot remember the name of it right now. I'll have to look and see if I can find it. But there were pamphlets that were released that were basically telling slave owners, here is how you manage your slave population. And breaking up the nuclear family and or disallowing the nuclear family within your slave populations was a massive push point.
And Marx also wrote about this as well.
Yeah, it was very intentionally done when slave owners started to realize, they're coalescing, they're creating community. This is a problem for us because it was not only a problem in terms of rebellion, but it was a problem in that they're just being people.
Yeah.
How do we continue to deny humanity when they're being people and doing what people do?
Right.
And so that was very intentional. The selling off of males, the not allowing marriage between
raping the women.
Yeah,
so
all the things. Yeah, have your own kids too. So because of that, I have to believe that there were elements within government who understood how this was going to work. Okay. I think that the majority of voters, I think the majority of even people in Congress, this was a heartstrings decision for them.
Assuming the best.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, Lyndon Johnson with his Great Society knew exactly what he was doing. That man was born of that culture, never disavowed that culture. Yep. He was a virulent racist till the day he died.
Yep.
And knew that this was where we were going to end up.
When I said no, I want to clarify my position on it.
Please do. We'll edit all this out.
Is it possible and maybe even likely that there were people in government that hoped that would be the result? Yes. But routinely, government passes legislation to fix a problem that they see. That legislation creates problems. And then they pass more legislation to fix the problems that they see, and that legislation creates problems.
Right.
And so I do believe that there are people in government who legitimately think that what they're going to do is really going to help people.
Right.
I believe that they are, in their own minds, altruists. They just don't understand sociology. They don't understand economics. They look at John Maynard Keynes and everything he writes and yeah, let's hope that works.
Yeah.
Right. But
or if I did it, it would go right. My motives are pure, so
my motives are pure, and
real
it's not,
socialism has never been tried.
And it's not that the idea was a bad one; it's just that it was underfunded, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only way they know how to solve problems is to grow government and to spend more. So I do believe that when these laws were passed, there were people that were like, "Yes, finally, this is going to really set things straight, and fix things." I would be zero surprised to find that the people pushing the legislation hardest were like, this will really disrupt the black community.
Yeah. And I mean,
Nixon with his drug war introducing crack cocaine.
That would check out with the consistency of our government today.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And that ties in with even gun control legislation that happened at the time. That was targeting
as Maj Touré says, all gun control is racist.
Yes. Thank you for quoting Maj Touré. That makes me very happy.
Black guns matter.
Yes, sir. Which again, that is a double meaning. Also, it does mean specifically the black guns that everybody tries to ban, but he specifically is also talking about black gun ownership mattering. So that is his organization, and it is a phenomenal one. Check out Maj Touré for sure.
Linked below.
He's the kind of libertarian that makes me a little uncomfortable even.
Ooh.
Like he's one of those dudes that I'm just like, I don't think you're wrong, but man, you just said that. But no, I like Maj.
He's only been banned a few times from social media.
But Maj Touré doesn't make me uncomfortable at all.
To call back, Nelson is a social media.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
but this is where
makes me uncomfortable.
To bring it back to the original question, this is where I come back to that idea that there are certain universal bedrock truths. Family matters.
Good show.
The family
original Bill Johnson.
No, the family structure, the nuclear family matters. And no matter what any sociologist or what, new wave feminist or what Hillary Clinton has said in her books,
or emails.
we don't know what that is.
And only some of her books, because her books contradict.
The nuclear family matters, and it is why Western society has become what it has become.
I agree.
Largely, and I would say Middle Eastern society has become what it has become. Yeah. This is why these places were cradles of civilization, because family mattered, community mattered, and it was not in the same way where obviously you can get into the African continent and you see some of that, but you largely see pure tribalism. You belong to the tribe belongs to you, and that tighter accountability of immediate family, it was not there in a lot of these situations. And so along with a lot of other resource issues and obviously, power dynamics and all that, but a bedrock truth is a nuclear family does matter. It just does.
Yeah, and on the topic of it being lost to Western civilization, as you pointed out, there was during the slave trade, there was people writing about it. Karl Marx, like a big contingent for him was that there can't be nuclear families. Got to get rid of that. When Black Lives Matter came under a lot of fire for being Marxist,
right?
Their website, one of the things on the website was you have to destroy the nuclear family.
Right.
They removed a bunch of their tenets so that it wasn't quite so alarming. But these are things that make people uncomfortable. And I'm sure you're familiar with it. Biden recently said there's no such thing as someone else's child. He says our nation's children are all our children.
Yeah, try me on that one.
I'm sorry, buddy. I don't co-parent with the government.
No.
My kids are my kids. Your kids are your kids. I want
Thank
good
God
things
his
for your
kids,
but your kids are not my responsibility, right? Like, I hope your kids do well.
Yeah.
For everybody listening, I want good things for your kids. But if that's going to mean...
it's not my concern.
But your kids are your responsibility. Yeah. And so I hope you steward your kids well.
Right. So again, this gets back to me, the whole thing. There are some universals. And so going purely from perspective, it just doesn't hold up. It has not proved out well in life at all.
That was a long loop.
This was good.
We're ranters. What do we do? We are ranters.
I'm getting heated, man.
Sheldon hasn't even gotten in his high voice yet. Though,
that's good.
Well, we're talking
I
about,
have no idea.
We got to talk about the other movie.
I've never even heard of this movie. Yeah. What's a Star War?
All he knows is that Anakin or Leia and Luke kiss.
Yeah.
That's where he's at still.
Wait, they're siblings?
That's one of my favorite stickers
gross.
I've ever seen. It's the picture of it's a silhouette of Luke and Leia kissing, and it has Vader silhouette, and it says, "When you don't know who your father is, anybody can be your sister."
Yikes!
Wow, there's so much truth in that.
That is true.
All right. So
also, Luke didn't kiss Leia. I mean, she kissed him.
Yeah.
Both times
she made the move.
They kiss in A New Hope, and he starts it. They kiss in Empire, and she starts it.
No, wait a minute.
A New Hope was just on the cheek.
Wait a minute. No, she kisses him
on the cheek.
in A New Hope.
Yeah, it was just
she kissed. She was the aggressor.
She
always.
was the aggressor both times.
She kissed him there and said, "For
That
luck."
floozy.
That was on the cheek.
And then she kissed him to spite Han. And
that was on the lips.
She lightly kisses him after they get him back from the with his arm not there anymore. Yeah.
You know what's weird?
So many things.
I'm thinking about it now. That well, there's that. No, there is a 3-year gap between A New Hope and Empire, and like their relationships with each other have not changed at all
in 3 years.
That's that's just not how things work.
Entire high school experience.
I don't know though, because in A New Hope, Leia clearly has the upper hand on everybody, without a doubt. There is not a point in that where she is not basically running the show and making sure that nothing is falling apart. When they're escaping the Death Star, I mean, they would have been in trouble without Leia during that entire experience. However, by the time you get to Empire,
they wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Leia.
That's also true. That's also true.
She wouldn't have gone.
She was the MacGuffin that was not a MacGuffin.
Yeah. They wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Cassian Andor.
That's right. So. That's a whole other thing. But by the time you get to Empire, there's clearly been some like power dynamic shifts. So,
that's true.
Because her relationship to Han has changed.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you that.
And so there are some differences that I would actually push back on that. So
jumping way forward in the movie, Luke and Darth Sidious are talking to each other, and Luke says,
"Feels weird that you just call him that related to this movie. It's correct, but that feels weird."
Yeah.
You mean Senator Palpatine?
No.
He's Emperor Palpatine.
Emperor.
So Luke says to Sidious, "Your overconfidence is your weakness."
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to Sidious's response, do you agree with Luke's assessment?
Overconfidence.
Your overconfidence is your weakness.
That scenario has definitely gotten me in trouble.
You mean in terms of the movie?
Or
in terms of...
I'm not talking about bias. I'm saying, does Luke have the right grip on Sidious here? Is Palpatine's confidence in his own brilliance his greatest weakness?
Yes.
And we don't see that play out very many times.
No.
I think the time where it plays out the biggest is in A New Hope, because we find out in Empire he leaked these plans.
Right.
But in A New Hope, that wasn't a leak. That was them getting the better of it.
Right.
And then even in Empire, he leaked the plans, and it still didn't work out.
Because you kind of see the stereotypical narcissist in Palpatine throughout this, where even when something goes wrong, I've foreseen this. It's like
it's all part of the plan.
This was all part of the plan.
Yeah. You see that in Clone Wars too.
I wanted to
trust the plan.
I wanted a burnt to the crisp Anakin Skywalker. This is all part of the plan. Now I can control him. So it's always turning the thing to being not just to his advantage, but to being part of his master plan.
Like it was always.
It's
nothing
like
was a
he could have
mistake.
died out there.
I think,
it's a weird God complex. Honestly, is what you see Palpatine has.
I'm glad you used those specific words, because I as we said earlier.
This is all scripted.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm glad you're following the show notes I gave you. As we said earlier, right? Where Sidious kind of represents a characterization, but that we do see played out, of people who just want power, pursuing positions in politics. Their overconfidence is their weakness. They're as we were talking about, right? They see a problem, they write legislation.
If I do it, it'll fix it.
Right. Their own hubris is their downfall, but also that refusal to acknowledge. So, for example, Biden campaigning in 2020 talked a lot about the lack of equity in our justice system.
Biden comes up a lot when we talk about Sidious. It's crazy.
Their ages are the same.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah.
Also, I'm pretty sure I've seen lightning bolts shoot out of his fingers. There's that Darth Biden photo where for some reason he thought it would be a great photo op to give a speech on a podium with red lights behind him and black. It was dark. Anyway, he campaigned talking about the inequity in the justice system, which does exist. He wasn't wrong about that.
Yeah.
But what he ignored was, well, who wrote the legislation that made this inequity?
Oh, yeah.
Well, he did.
Yes, he
did.
He
championed the 94 crime bill.
Yep.
He championed the drug war.
Which I disagree with Ben Shapiro. It was not good policy.
No, Ben Shapiro's an idiot.
He was wrong.
Ben Shapiro's a real dumb.
But we'd welcome you to the show, Ben, if you're listening.
Yeah, if you want to be on here, we'll have you.
You can say many things about Ben Shapiro. You cannot say that he's dumb. You can say that he is a little bit too in love with his own opinion. But he's not stupid.
I'm going to say he's dumb.
Oh.
Just double down.
This episode just turned into a part 2.
Okay. So
I do think some of his opinions are dumb.
And then you mentioned his God complex. When we see in the Old Testament, the Israelites ask for a king. Samuel says, you don't want a king? They say, yeah, we want a king. Samuel goes to God and says, hey, they want a king. I told him not to. And God's like, all right, but tell him a king's going to do this, 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 and this. And he tells them, and they're like, yeah, we still want that. And Samuel apologizes, and God's like, listen, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. I'll give him a king, and it's going to be exactly like I told him it would be. And then he even gives rules. Hey, kings, this is how you got to be kings. And none of the kings obeyed those rules. And if you look at both the warnings and the rules, like we have the same today.
Yeah.
I see government very much like a Tower of Babel type situation where it's man's attempt to be like God and to make the world in his own image.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you say Sidious has a God complex, yes, he does. And that's why I still, even when we have these super corrupt politicians who just want power, I still wouldn't put it past them for in their own mind to be convinced that what they're doing is for the betterment. It
actually reminds me of the moment when Palpatine and Revenge of the Sith is having that discussion with Anakin, like says all these things, and then we will have peace.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the scene.
I think he believes it.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the scene in Spartacus. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. But there's a scene where Crassus is having this discussion, and basically somebody says to him, okay, well then what do you want? And he basically lists out all this thing, and the guy looks at him and goes, you want dictatorship? And he just shook his head and he said, no, order.
Yeah.
Because order was this is the way it's going to work. I can do it.
Well,
I want this power. This is what you will give me.
Anakin and Padme have that exact same conversation in Attack of the Clones.
Yep. And so I feel like that's probably might have been even slightly called back to that film, which is a great film, by the way. And the last Gladiator film made before Gladiator.
Oh.
And that was made in 1950. And there's all kinds of interesting stories with that and how that came about. Great movie, though. Great movie.
So after Luke, I think accurately summarizes Sidious's biggest flaw.
Okay, so go back to what was Luke's line to Sidious?
Your overconfidence is your weakness.
Okay.
Sidious turns to Luke and says, your faith in your friends is yours.
With venom.
Like
he touched a nerve. He touched a nerve. And
do you think that Sidious is correct, or is he just in the moment reacting upset?
I think he was just mad.
He's spitting back.
Yeah.
Do you think there's truth to what he said? Do you think that Luke's confidence and faith in his friends was a weakness for him?
Sidious doesn't have friends, so how
is that what I said?
Know?
No,
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
He has no perspective.
Like
right.
He's looking at Luke, and Luke is endearing to all these people. Like you look at even Han is going out and giving up his life for a guy that he just caught a ride with in New Hope, and all of a sudden, like you see these characters endearing themselves to Luke. And in the second movie that I watched, you see him say, basically make Luke public enemy number one and basically try and pick him off and separate him. The problem is that Luke is a gatherer of people. People are flocking to him and surrounding him, and he's an unlikely hero. He's not necessarily the most skilled at any one thing, but he keeps coming up gold.
He just wanted to participate.
And now he's standing in front of Palpatine.
He was just happy to be there.
And it's like a David and Goliath situation. You see Palpatine just basically and Luke accidentally almost puts his finger on what his greatest weakness is, and he's just spitting at this kid like, you and your friends, like basically, why don't you just go die? Like
and that mangy dog in the van,
right.
Yeah, we're gonna make that same joke. Yeah,
well, and you
trying
also
to pick him
dog
up.
and those meddling
and you also
kids.
forget
Chewbacca's the dog,
and he references this too. But Luke was a dead man.
Yeah.
He had no intention of surviving this encounter.
No,
like none at all. And his hope was, maybe I can redeem my father. But if nothing else, I'm going to distract the Emperor long enough that they're going to win this battle. They're going to accomplish, and they're going to kill him. They're going to wipe out this empire, and I'm willing to martyr myself for that.
Yeah.
He believed in more than just his friends. I think Empire was him only being concerned about his friends. And obviously Yoda called him out on that. Like, listen, I know this is this is a sacrifice they're willing to make.
Yeah.
Are you willing to let them make that if it means ultimately getting what you want? And Luke wasn't willing to do that, and you see the mess. But this Luke, while he didn't want to sacrifice his friends, he was willing to say, "Yeah, I'm going to let them do what they're going to do, and I understand that sacrifice now. I'm going to do it now too." It's a different Luke. It's a more mature Luke that we see here. So again, I think Palpatine's threats don't work because, again, he was dead man walking. He had no intention of surviving.
So in this movie, and this kind of goes with what we're saying, in this movie, there's that implication that we don't know what Luke's going to do. Because, there's that whole he's dressed in black this movie.
Right.
Like, could he go to the dark side? Do you think...
He's got a different color lightsaber already.
Right. Do you think there was ever a moment in Luke's mind that he was going to be manipulated to the dark side? Or do you think Luke, for the whole movie, from Luke's perspective, do you think Luke knew better? Like, Luke knew better enough to not?
No.
Or do you think there was a chance Luke could have gone to the dark side from Luke's mind?
I mean, even in Empire, you saw him wrestle with it just for a short period of time. Like that, you could see it kind of pass over his face, where he's like, "Man, I that the possibility was there."
What do you think the linchpin would have been?
So here's the thing: Empire was him passing the test of power,
right?
Because that's what Vader offered him.
Yeah,
come with me. I'll give you identity because I'm your father, and we'll take power together. Unlimited power together. We'll eliminate the Emperor. We can do it together. Again, showing Vader's weakness. I can't beat this guy, but together we can do it. Mm-hmm. And his response is, "No, I'm jumping. Like, I'm going to jump." That was his first dead man. Like, nope. That was his realization. That was his growth point. In this one, I think it was coming back to his whole thing of he wants to see his father redeemed. That was his ultimate goal in that moment.
Yeah.
And when that suddenly turned into the possibility of, now I'm going to lose Leia to the dark side, that was his moment. It wasn't about power.
Right.
It was about possession that he felt over her, possessiveness for her in a protective sense. I mean, it was a positive motivator, but where he would have done he was going to murder his dad,
and
just to
fighting
prevent that
becomes
from happening.
Super, like sloppy
and erratic and
nice.
Dangerous.
Yeah,
dangerous to everyone in the room, including himself.
Yeah,
but again, he had that moment where clarity happens. But I think that was the moment where,
if he was going to turn, that's when
it was going to happen, and it didn't. He suddenly realized that.
Well, because he gets the better of Vader, and that's when Sidious comes in and he's like, "Be at my side. Take your father's place."
Yeah, which again, he'd already passed the power test.
It was a great.
And that's the
I've
thing.
been practicing. I didn't get a lot of sleep.
He came back and offered him what he'd already been offered, which Palpatine didn't know he'd been offered that.
Right.
Because that was a father and son moment. We're going to betray my mentor.
Yeah.
He didn't know that had happened. So he was poking at something that Luke had already killed. And I think that request from Palpatine is what brought him back to reality.
Yeah.
I think that's the significance of looking at Vader's hand, looking back at his own hand. I think it's like, hey, my dad has a mechanical hand and I have one too. No, I think he was going back to that moment of like, I already decided this. And then it was, nope, you failed. Like you pulled the wrong card. You thought that was the ace that you had. And my dad played the ace here underneath here. And I'm good. You offered me something I've already been offered. Like, no, I'm good. Like, I win. And that was his moment. That I think the Emperor unintentionally brought him back to himself in that moment.
Yeah.
Because he offered the wrong thing. He misunderstood what Luke's motivation was.
That's heavy.
That's good.
Any other big biases? I've got one more note here, but it's not really a bias to the movie, more of an observation.
I didn't observe anything in this movie, so
as a child, this was my favorite movie of the franchise.
Okay.
Because the most stuff happens in it.
In the Ewoks.
Yes. Yeah. But the most stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on in this one. But Empire, obviously, the older I got, the more I realized everything that's actually happening in that film, and that one by far is my favorite. But I think it was a good wrap. I don't think there were any major blunders in this film. I think that it was a good cap off to everything that had been, and it gave us a satisfying ending.
Yeah.
And again, to my mind, that was the end of the story. That was the end of the Skywalker saga. There was nothing else that needed to be told. And of course, the expanded universe and all that came later was interesting, and I enjoyed those things.
Yeah.
But in terms of film, like, I was completely satisfied with where we ended up.
Yeah.
And I will say, that was one of the things I did enjoy, was that Lucas added going back to these other places. So seeing Naboo, seeing them pull down the statue of Palpatine, it's like the world had gotten bigger because of the prequels, and so we needed to touch on those things.
Yeah.
And so I liked that aspect of it.
Me too. That was a satisfying, that was an update that I liked. The
ending.
Hayden Christensen as Obi-Wan, Force Ghost, I liked.
Yeah.
As
I know what you mean.
Vader, Force Ghost, I liked.
Yeah.
Again, not a bias in the film, but considering Vader's face can't be seen, when Sidious is electrocuting Luke, they spend a lot of time doing reaction shots of Vader, and it's just a static image because you can't see his face.
Still just the helmet.
Yeah, still just a helmet.
Right.
And they spend it's a weird amount of time where you're watching your son getting electrocuted and presumably considering, what do I do? But we can't see any of that play out on his face.
But originally, yes. But because of the prequels, this is another mirror moment. You're mirroring the moment that he had of watching Palpatine dying and about to be killed by Mace Windu. This is a mirror of that exact scenario.
Except now,
and now
he's on the ground instead
right.
of
And now he's
ground.
making a
Palpatine
decision, but once again, to save someone he loves.
Yeah.
But in this term, he's like, I'm letting go of it. I'm going to give up myself. Like, I'm not going to survive this. I'll give up myself, but I'm gonna save this person. He's getting what he ultimately was going for in the whole thing of trying to save Padme.
That's
obviously
really
it was too
good
late.
point.
It was too late for her. But here's his flesh and blood. The person they created together.
Yeah.
And so to my mind, when I see that now that the prequels have happened, again, it makes that more intense because I feel like he's regurgitating like, this is my second chance. I can do correctly here what I didn't do correctly before.
Yeah.
And then he takes out Palpatine.
It's my opinion. His helmet should already have been off by this point in the movie,
or at least
for that
broken
to
or
make
something.
That scene work.
I agree with that.
You need to have a face
cinematically.
You need to have a reaction for a reaction.
Star Wars still does that though. Like if you watch The Mandalorian, there's many shots where they look at Din Djarin and you're just like, why are we looking
still
at him?
Just a steel bucket.
Like, and I love The Mandalorian, but there's moments you're just like, why are we looking at him right now? Can't tell anything.
That's a good point because I've I've watched The Mandalorian and seen that happening and thought to myself, even though you can't, you imagine what's happening.
You project it.
There's in narrative, there's a way where like the main character of a story is almost always the most boring. Yeah. And they do that on purpose because you can imagine yourself as a boring person, but you can't imagine yourself as an interesting person.
Every day of my life.
So you can put yourself in Frodo's shoes, but you can't put yourself in Aragorn's shoes. You want to be Aragorn, but you imagine yourself as Frodo. You imagine yourself as Harry Potter. You'd like to be...
I'm more of a Ron Weasley.
Ron Weasley or Hermione, but you can more easily relate to Harry. And a lot of authors do this, and it's interesting the way a mask does that in cinema, especially considering how often, like with Judge Dredd, Stallone wouldn't wear the helmet because he wanted his face to be seen. But having that mask almost makes the audience work a bit.
That's why RoboCop worked.
Yeah. Well, and that's what
the original.
Yeah.
That's on our list too, isn't it?
RoboCop?
No, I'm thinking. Never mind. I'm sorry. For some reason, I was looking at RoboCop a lot. Our last episode, like I had it up on IMDb when we had the previous episode, and for some reason I was thinking it's not top 350.
Why?
It's not
because it never came up in conversation.
It did come up.
Okay,
it did come up. RoboCop came up. The director,
Robot Cop,
the director, Irving Kershner.
Oh, he did. Yeah. He did both.
He did Empire, right?
Yeah. So that's why I was looking up. I was like, for some reason I was thinking it was the top 250, but it's not. Yeah.
Okay,
it's not.
Sheldon, Nate. Jeff, do you have any biases not yet covered that came out of this movie to you?
Nah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. This has been...
Well, let's get into our wrap-up questions then.
It's a great idea, Nelson.
Well, I will give one quick call back.
Please do.
We have plenty.
One
if
quick
there's anything else,
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
One of the things that Sheldon asked me about was the religious question that you asked about Star Wars and how that overlays on Christianity.
Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit. And I want to say that I've always looked at Star Wars as an exploration of the duality of man, and not really any deeper than that. I don't think it has.
I think that's where it works best.
Yeah, I don't think there's any really good Christian illusion in it.
Yeah,
because it's so intentionally Eastern religion and not Western. He did that on purpose. He wanted basic religion, but he wanted something that felt slightly unfamiliar to a Western audience. It was very intentional the way he did it. But again, I think the religious theme of Star Wars is the man's capacity for good and for evil. So. Just throwing my opinion in on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was one thing, and this is just kind of my own tick. I looked up, has there been anybody written a paper on the economics of a Death Star?
Oh, my goodness. And yes, I'm sure there has
been. In 2015, an economics professor wrote a paper called An Economic Inquiry into the Implications of the Death Star. But this is particularly why I wanted to bring it up. When I Googled the title of this essay, because I wanted to see how was it reviewed. Now, depending on your search engine, you're going to get different results. But like the first 10 results were things like...
I use Ask Jeeves.
CBC wrote an article in 2015 responding to this about why the rebels shouldn't have blown up the Death Star. And I'm like, no, you're not getting it. Like the Death Star and FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, got it right. Their headline is, building the Death Star was an economic catastrophe, right? Like these giant government projects... So Hayek has the what he called the calculation problem, right? Where Friedrich Hayek was like, you can't know if what you're doing is good because you don't have all the math inputs to know if it's worthwhile. And then Mises, his predecessor, took a much broader stance, which is like, you can't even know if this is something that needed built, right? Like, how do you know that that's where a school should be? Right. Because somebody decided school should be there. Well, if people were bidding to put a building there and somebody won the bid and they decided, well, then that's because the school should be there.
Yeah.
Austrian Economics 101.
Oh, I love it so much. so much. So yeah, linked in the show notes for those interested and who are wonky like me. Building the Death Star was an economic catastrophe by the Foundation for Economic Education. It's worth the read.
I love that.
Wow.
Oh, man.
That's fascinating.
All right, Jeff, wrap up questions.
Yes, here we go. All right. Would you guys recommend this movie?
Yes.
On its own, no, but as part of the trilogy, yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying, yeah.
Okay.
And we talked about this.
And usually it's on its own, but
Right.
It's one story.
It all comes together.
And this
yeah.
is not one if you're. This is not the introduction. This is not the first movie you want to watch if you're starting Star Wars for the first
It'd
time.
be a bad spot to start.
But I mean, I don't think any of us are going to disagree. This movie's well worth the watch.
Yes.
Okay. Would you guys change the rating? It's PG
because PG-13 did not yet exist.
We all have we all have kids here.
Yeah. It was
because
Temple of Doom.
It was Temple of Doom that started. You're right. And that was 85?
Sounds right.
I think it'd be PG-13 if it came out today.
Yeah. I think there could be a little bit more.
Our guest last week told us the first PG-13
1984
Star Wars was
1 year
Revenge
later.
of the Sith.
1 year later.
That's true.
And it's because he killed kids. And Lucas apparently really struggled with that decision.
Right.
Now, a lot of Lucas mythology is retroactive, so I don't know if that's true, but that is the story that
well, when we have Lucas on one of our episodes,
good.
We'll ask him.
Yeah, I think it could have. I think it could have been a little.
Since you're not discussing Star Wars.
I think it could have had just
It'll
a little
have to
more.
Be Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Raiders.
I would have liked to have seen a little. Like I think it would have hit harder if more Ewoks had died. You only see that one Ewok die,
Right.
and that's the only one that matters to anybody.
Yeah,
but I think that would have given them a little bit more weight, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So there are some things where I think if you would have done a PG-13 rating, if it had existed at the time, I think upping the level a little bit to a PG-13 rating would have been good for that conclusion.
Yeah.
Palpatine was scary as heck though as a kid.
Yeah,
I will say
No,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, this. I'm
And
trying to
that
put myself.
soundtrack underneath.
Yeah,
whoa,
I try to
like
put
the choral
myself in the
stuff.
shoes of watching this movie for the first time in a cinema. Like, yeah, he would have been like, and they built him up really well.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning of this movie, which you'll watch eventually, Sheldon.
Have already watched
when
it.
they're talking with the guy, and they're like, "Oh, and the Emperor's coming here," and like that immediately put like fear
in them. Yeah.
Oh, we're about to
We're gonna
him.
meet
Like-
this guy.
Like, and then we saw
This
the clone
movie
troopers
does
in the
with
back, like-
Sidious what Rogue One does to Vader.
Yeah.
Rogue One really gave Vader that like, oh crap presence.
Which, in my opinion, is the second best Star Wars film ever made.
I think it's the first.
I think it's the one that you start with.
Yeah.
We discussed this in
Rogue
our
One,
episode.
New
you
Hope,
start with Rogue One.
Empire,
Yeah.
and you go back watch the prequels.
Yeah.
Wrap
That's
up
my
with-
order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that now.
And I like the TV show Clone Wars, but honestly, skip it and come back to it after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that it on the rating? Any more thoughts? Okay.
Yeah.
Has it aged well? We've kind of tapped into this a little bit already, but has the movie aged well?
Yes, if the prequels can add to it and give it more dimension and space, then I think it definitely aged into the 90s.
Yeah, I think it would have aged better without some of the additional CGI.
Yeah.
Because again, it wasn't
It's
there
jarring.
yet. I love what Lucas was trying to do
Right.
in pushing the envelope.
Right.
But it just wasn't there yet. And it shows that shows its age now. But like Jabba the Hutt,
Yeah.
goodness, looking at that dude, even
Yeah.
now, like I believe that is a real thing.
It grosses me out every
Yes.
time I watch it.
With his snot bubbles
Yeah.
and licking lips.
And just
the
like
two
Pizza
singers
the
that they
Hutt.
CGI'd in are so like jarringly bad.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's Muppet. They're Muppets,
Yeah.
and not in the good way.
Well, hold on. Yoda's a Muppet, and
Yes.
it's great.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Not in the good way.
Okay, yeah.
Which can we just say that the reveal of Yoda in Empire is one of the best reveals
Yeah.
ever in the history of
Yeah.
cinema.
Yeah.
Just this crazy little dude, and then all of a sudden just switches over. And John Williams with the score. I mean,
just the way
brilliant.
he's tearing everything apart
Oh, yeah.
and just making a giant mess.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I agree. I think it's aged well.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's always, it's kind of like you with Lando's thing.
The
like,
bandolier. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that the prequels just kind of confused was, and we talked about this in one of the previous episodes, when Vader was over Tatooine. Before, okay, this was the first movie, New Hope. You think Vader would put 1 and 2 together? We're on Tatooine. There's droids coming from Tatooine. This should sound familiar. Like just like there's some things that like now we know that Vader always like he came from like there's some things that like in when Obi-Wan saw the droids for the first time. Like I'm just talking the trilogy as a whole now. Like, when Vader when
there are things that suffer for the prequel trilogy.
Yeah,
right. It's
like
true.
and you're just like these should ring bells. Like we know the droids got their minds wiped,
but I think
the
if you
humans
R2 did not.
Just
3PO.
Right, that's right.
But also, I
That's
think
right.
if you've watched it in the order we just recommended, if you watched Rogue One, New Hope, Empire, then you go back and watch the prequel, you're not going to remember
You
those
don't notice
things.
that, but
if you watch the prequels, then you get there, you're like, no, you literally just saw them.
yeah,
Right.
So like that's the only thing that like I can get by, but I'm just like that didn't age well.
No.
That relationship doesn't shake hands anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Darth Vader should have been up on his game, knowing about these locations. He should recognize those droids immediately. Like he built one of them, for goodness sakes. Like it's just like that didn't make sense.
Yeah, and it was always funny to me because Leia to Alderaan makes sense because there's no connection at all there for
you never
for
even
Vader.
see Alderaan.
But Vader,
Point, yeah.
but to Tatooine with
No, it's brilliant. You're hiding him in plain sight.
But
Nate.
I always just went, well, that's why Obi-Wan was there.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan's usually like literally using the Force to shield him. Like Vader could not see him there,
Okay.
and probably in a logic sense, like there's no way they would send him back there. And then I think that was Obi-Wan's job through that whole thing.
And I would agree with that, but you can't.
I hear
He
you.
would recognize the droids.
Yeah, and he
Like,
made
it's-
3PO. I
Yeah,
mean, he built the dude.
Literally built it.
that didn't hold
Yeah.
up.
C-3PO
Which
goes
again-
back to the home that he was
But once
built
again,
at and doesn't recognize
if
it.
you remove Phantom Menace,
Well,
that
and-
kind of
and-
goes away.
And Nelson or
3PO is just the fussy droid
yeah.
that Padme happened to have.
Well, it was
a little
Nelson
bit.
or Steven who on the last episode when we talked about this exact same topic for the exact same question. There is that idea if Anakin truly died,
Yeah.
maybe Vader doesn't have any recollection of all that. And we
Yeah.
talked about that in the previous episode, how like maybe he completely blacked all that out. So like so you can justify it in a
I
way.
mean, a lot of
but,
that dude burned up.
But there still is some logic.
But then
You're like,
Luke's standing there.
these are not small droids.
Yeah.
Brain got cooked. Real bad.
Luke's
theater.
These are
standing
not
there
the droids you're looking for.
talking to Anakin at the end of this movie, like
Yeah.
trying to draw him out.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
he's
Some
not as
weird
dead
form
as-
of PTSD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can accept that.
And then last question.
Last question. Would this be in your personal top 250?
Of all movies.
Yeah, all the movies you've ever seen. Would this be in your top 250?
Easily. The Star Wars franchise is that for me. For sure.
I agree.
Except for the last three.
They don't exist.
No, they
Well,
do.
They do.
No, they don't exist.
They do.
That's not how existence works.
I reject your,
I would like to-
reject your reality and I substitute my own.
I would like to
On the
call
next
back
episode.
to a previous. I'd like to call back to a previous point in this conversation, Nate, where you said even when we don't like it, things are true.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, this and just for continuation, this is my favorite of the three. I don't think I've said that yet this episode. Like
It's my
I really enjoy going
containing
through this
it
one
just to
again.
these to this trilogy. It's my second favorite. I'd rank it the same as Nate, where you have Empire, then Return of the Jedi, New Hope. I don't enjoy A New Hope, but I think it's important for the story
Yes.
to work.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a good movie.
It's why the rest of the story gets well again because George Lucas is not a good director.
Yeah.
No.
He's a great concept
He's a good
man.
visionary.
He's a great visionary.
Yeah.
He's a great starter, but he's not a good director and he's a terrible writer.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
He's a terrible writer. You know, if you watched cast interviews, literally George Lucas's direction was that was
More.
great, but can we do it, faster and more intense? How about faster and more intense? We'll do it again. Shoot it faster and more intense. And they're like, "What are we even shooting? Like, what is this?" So
I walked across the room. Yeah, but
Yeah.
do it faster and more intense.
yeah, I think that the prequels were an extraordinary vision that Lucas just had too much power in, and I don't mean like in a bludgeoning
Right.
power. He had no limits.
Right.
There were no limitations on him.
Of
whatsoever.
trilogies, though, of the three trilogies, the trilogy of trilogies, I think the prequel trilogy has the best overarching story. Like from beginning to end, those three movies were designed
to flow.
And like you see that, like again, whether you like the Phantom Menace or not, like you see where they're going from the very beginning,
Right.
And it's just those three movies flow very well, even outside of Hayden Christensen's whiny acting.
Yeah.
The sequel trilogy struggles because there is that disconnect from director, from story perspective,
Right.
from where we're going with this,
Right.
and it doesn't flow well.
Right. The second two movies flow together much better than the first
It's
one
true.
does.
Yeah.
It's true. But I love the synchronicity of the prequel trilogy, just because they had the end in mind.
Yeah.
For,
My
like-
only beef with the prequel trilogy is they needed one villain like Vader throughout the whole thing.
That would have been nice.
and the
Maul
fact
was
that,
supposed to be that.
Really?
Lucas killed him off because Lucas didn't feel comfortable having a villain survive the movie. Why? I don't know.
because
He did it with the other movies.
Yeah, that's right.
But
But yeah, if Maul
this was the one.
Yeah.
This was the one
Yeah.
exception.
if Maul had been
it's
your
because he killed Qui-Gon Jinn. But again, you go back to A
that's the
New
thing.
Hope, he killed
and that would have given
Vader killed
And could you imagine that fight, a second fight between Obi-Wan and and Maul
Yeah.
after he'd seen him kill Qui-Gon if he'd have gotten away.
Yeah.
And so sequel, you have him training Anakin, but then he's got to face this major conundrum of like, how do I keep my emotions out of this? And just make Maul the villain throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
He was a wasted villain.
Yeah.
Dooku was good because
Dooku's great.
I love
That's what the Clone Wars helps with, though.
Yes,
yeah,
is
sure.
bringing
You're right,
the
right.
depth
And
to Maul.
Rebels.
I think that was
Rebels
I
and
think
Rebels.
that was a like, dang it, I made a mistake here and trying to repair it.
Dave Filoni
Yeah.
did a lot
Yeah, and I'm sorry that
to George Lucas's chaos.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that most recent finale between Maul and Obi-Wan was just perfect.
It was
just
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the prequels suffer from not having, and obviously Palpatine is the villain in the whole thing.
Right.
But I think they should have done some mirroring with that. Give us a villain like Vader who
Right. Well, like have that apprentice and the
Right.
apprentice and master situation
Yeah.
through the whole trilogy,
and
I
make
agree
him
with that.
make him suddenly expendable by that third movie when he had been
Right.
integral to the plot.
Right. Yeah. So, well, before we get to you guys and we kind of close off your guys' plug and stuff, I will say, we do the IMDb top 250. So if you guys are out there rating these movies, there's going to be some more future Star Wars movies. So if you guys want us to continue to talk about these with the new ones that are, there's 3 more new ones coming out.
Don't
that were
just rate
announced.
them well because you want us to cover them because you're just
Or
dropping
just
the
rate them
bucket.
well
Rate
so you
them
want us to
honestly.
cover them. But there will be another story with Rey. There will be a Mandalorian movie, and then there will be a movie that predates all of this, going back the earliest we've seen so far, outside of the
Old
books.
Republic.
Can
Outside
I
of the
can I
books.
make a
Absolutely.
prediction?
100%. Yeah.
They're going to make the first Jedi a woman.
I don't know. They're not going back that far. They're doing the Old Republic.
Okay, I'd heard that they were going back to the person who started the original Jedi
Council?
Order.
Yeah.
I have no more outside of what they announced at whatever it was, but yeah, I'm never surprised by some of the weird things that are done anymore. But yeah, I have no idea.
I only care that they would make it a woman because they care so much that it's got to be a woman.
Yeah.
I don't actually give
Right.
a flying fart in space.
For example, Black
what
Widow's
they do.
Black Widow's a great character.
Yes.
You can write competent women well. They just don't.
Yes, they're caricatures,
Right.
Yeah.
Because
like female comedians.
competent characters isn't their first goal. Their goal is
Thank
we need
you for getting that. Thank you, Sheldon.
we need a woman character, right?
Yeah.
It's not we need a competent character and we're going to make her a woman. It's we need a woman character.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which again, call back to Firefly. That's why Firefly was great.
I'll need to watch that.
I think that about does it
That's
for us.
Outside of their plug, we're gonna give them. a
We'd
chance
like you to plug some stuff
Yeah.
and then we're going to wrap
Where,
up.
where can our listeners find you guys?
The Things We Say podcast. We are at TTWS Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And then it's facebook.com/The Things We Say podcast.
And that'll be in
And
the show notes as well.
all the other platforms, podcast platforms, The Things We Say is there.
Yep. And we've been on a slight hiatus due to a couple of personal things, but we're back at it now. And
Yeah.
it's a good one. We have a good time. We gibber about whatever nonsense we feel or whatever deep things we feel in that moment.
Yeah.
I've not listened to everything, but the episodes I've listened to, I've really enjoyed, and I love your guys' banter. And I go back different ways with each of you. Like I know each of you from different walks of life, and stuff like it's just really nice to have these. I mean, Wayne County circles, or everyone knows everyone.
That's right.
But just I enjoy the banter and I enjoy the topics that come up and stuff, and it's just fun how all my worlds are colliding, and just all 3 of you guys are here together in different walks of life. It's just I love this. Like this is a great night, and this has been a great conversation. Plus Star Wars, you know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Should we say it this time or save it for next time?
It depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about my medical
Well,
history,
we
let's
can
save it for next time.
We'll record this twice and we'll pick the one that we actually want to do. Join us in a week. Starting the month of
Let's
June,
announce it. Yeah.
starting next week, we will be weekly rather than bi-weekly.
Yes.
And we'll be covering Paths of Glory. When I initially pitched the idea of this show to Sheldon Stauffer, his first response was, "Are you sure you want to go every 2 weeks? 250 episodes is a lot to do in 2 weeks." And I was like, Sheldon, that's really not the point.
I'm like, you're committing years of your life.
But in 2 weeks, in 1 week, we'll be back with Paths of Glory by Stanley Kubrick, 1957
The
film.
third Kubrick movie.
It'll be our third Kubrick movie, starring Kirk Douglas, father of Michael Douglas. Died
Phenomenal actor, that man.
And
different Doug, right?
Yes,
different
Doug.
funny though.
Thanks. That's why I'm here.
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be an asshat. I was making a Doug funny joke because his name is Doug Funny.
I
caught
okay,
it.
Okay. All right.
I
good.
have no qualms with how that panned out.
So, as always, in the show notes below, you'll find where you can watch Return of the Jedi, as well as where you could watch Paths of Glory, so you can watch it ahead of the recording. This is a movie that I've not seen, and I know nothing about.
Oh, I have also not seen it, but I know everything about it.
Ooh, that'll be interesting.
I'm kidding.
All I know. It's a World War I movie.
Yeah. So is that the First World War?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's the prequel to the Second World War.
At the time, it was just called the World War.
World War. Yeah.
We're gonna find out what happened. What turned Anakin Skywalker into space Hitler? All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and you'll hear from us next week.
Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.